Overlord First Half Chapter 76, Gaiden, The Past Nazarick, The Relationship of a Brother and Sister. Then Momonga-san. I will bring Yama-chan and An-chan to Aura's place. Yes. Got it. I will definitely return at the promised 8 p.m. Understood. However, I shall call you if we assemble the members of the Fire Giants hunting party earlier, so please come as fast as you can. Got fight. In front of Momonga was a meat-like pink blob. Amongst the slime types, this color was rare. This was as seeing a shiny and sparkly slime pulsate and twitch was not a nice thing to see. While the figure that looked like innards made surprisingly sharp movements and was about to move away from Momonga. Bukabakune. The voice of a third party could be heard, causing the slime to freeze. It then flabbily moved. Slimes had an appearance where you could not tell where was its face, but Momonga felt that it was facing the direction of the voice. Oi! Calling me by that name, I look forward to the next time I return to our parents' house. That quiet but heavy voice seemed to crawl up from the depths of hell, causing its recipient to stop like he was being pressed down on. If you don't like it then don't use that name. Who? My online contacts can use it. So can the members of Einzulgon. But you can't, younger brother. The one who was frantically rebutting was a warrior-like man who was wearing a beautifully decorated full-body armor. The imbued magic released a pair of wings of light. The man wore that armor and also a mask, and the really why one could tell he was a man from his voice. Of course, the guildmaster Momonga knew that person. Ah, hello. Parankino-san. Good evening. Momonga-san. They were fellow members of society who lightly bowed to each other. The quivering meat blob went up to Parankino, stretched a hand out from her blob, and touched the armor. Really, this armor seems like a holy outfit from somewhere. Nachan, cross something right? Around 15 years ago the anime was remade. Does Momonga-san know of it? No. I do not watch much anime. Me too. You don't see anything but arage original works. That is not true. But seriously. Nachan, don't lower Momonga-san's evaluation of me. Should he say something to the disheartened Parankino? Momonga was at a loss for words, and the meat blob did not stop her attack. The truth is the truth, what's wrong with it? There is no way I can watch an anime adaptation where my sister goes I can know in the original work. But you know it? Parankino grunted like he was hit. Momonga felt like the situation was going downhill. Hey, you are already appearing in the normal works so you retire from the erotic stuff. Stop changing your name to 5 or 6 things and appearing in arage? In terms of finances and time it's great you know. But then. I'm not even doing the main. Stop it. I don't want to hear our family's dirty laundry. To top it off Momonga-san is here. And could you not appeal to that person? Momonga mumbled under his breath. Really, stop being a seiyuo. Momonga felt that the atmosphere had changed. It was probably the most appropriate for the guildmaster to intervene her, but he had no desire to stand in front of an angry woman. He deliberately ignored Parankino's gaze for help. Ho, you can really talk. Even though you were so happy when I got Mizuno's signature for you. What did you say? Stay as a seiyuo, you said while giving me a doge as a right. Parankino grunted like he was hit. And as if recalling something, the meat blob shook. And, she's quite the good friend, and likes shock comedy a lot you know? Shut up. My Mizuki is a refined lady who drinks red tea. She is different from those who appear in arage like Nachan. Momonga was confused while wondering who Mizuno was, but then he recalled her being a seiyuu that Parankino often talked about. It was when he was explaining about the music and voices of a recent game. Even she changed her name and appeared in arage. The same as me, she started in arage you know? Look at reality. No. That Mizuno is different from my Mizuki. Parankino spewed out his heart with insane over-the-top gestures. The meat blob was about to reply, but her body then moved backwards. As her body moved, she had an air of exhaustion and faced Momonga. I see. Boys are terrible. Ah, Momonga-san. The two are waiting for me so I shall take my leave. Then see you later. Momonga did not want to left alone with the shocked Parankino here, but he could not say it. He stared at the retreating meat blob and the lifeless Parankino inside. And then grumbled. Really? Overlord First Half Chapter 77, Gaiden, Come everyone to Demiurge's ranch. Roble Kingdom. It was a kingdom to the southwest of Riestai's kingdom, and its territory was only half of it. Geographically it was close to the slain theocracy, but it had almost no trade with the theocracy. There was a giant hilly area between the slain theocracy and the Roble Kingdom, the Abelian Hills, and a large forest, the Great Forest of Ibasha. What especially obstructed that was the many demi-human tribes like goblins and orcs in the Abelian Hills that constantly fought each other. The wall of fortresses that surrounded the Roble Kingdom was created to prevent the invasion of demi-human groups. However, since there was no existence that could rally the goblins or orcs, the wall was never used. There were countless tribes in the wide Abelian Hills. Where those demi-humans stayed were intense. This proved that the orcs did not live a life staying in one place. There was a tent where the Crooked Tusk tribe stayed. None of the tribes had something this large. The pillar that supported the 10-meter-tall structure itself seemed that it would be difficult to carry. The same Crooked Tusk tribe did not have tents this extravagant. They had extremely dilapidated ones. This tent was brought in by someone. Its workmanship was at the level where one would immediately understand this. In the center of that tent was a chair. It was a lump of countless bones forced into the shape of a chair. However, its use was obvious. It was so large that it was not obvious what it was, including the back. It was about 6 meters tall. In addition, the empty eye sockets of the countless skulls that decorated it peered into one soul. It was a throne. Despite it being a fearsome creation, it made one wonder which artist made it. It made the viewer feel a sense of beauty. If one stood from afar, the pure white decorated throne would immediately catch their eye. There was no one sitting on that throne. It was like there was someone supposed to be sitting there, but they had left, leaving it empty. However, there was someone standing next to that throne. The word handsome would be the most suitable word to describe his face. His slightly angled eyes might cause him to lose some points, but his sharp nose bridge, his pale and thin lips, and his light-hearted but gentle smile brought a sense of trust to those who saw him. He was extremely similar to a human, but he had definite inhuman qualities. His height was 2 meters, and his skin was a shiny red. 2 sharp goat-like horns protruded from his temples, and giant black wings were attached to his back, proving that he was not human. Several shadows kneeled before them. They were not orcs. They were demons. That was the most accurate word to describe the existences there. Now, shall we begin our regular meeting? They were extremely gentle words. His words soaked deep into the hearts of everyone, and let them feel comfortable. He bowed to the throne, as if someone was sitting there. Following him, the kneeling figures also respectfully bowed. It was so respectful that if there was not enough space beneath their heads, something terrible would have happened. First is Torturer. Yes, Demiurge-sama. The one who reacted to his, Demiurge's, voice was one of the shadows. He was a demon with a black leather face that perfectly suited him. His skin was white, milk white. His blood vessels were complete visible due to his skin color, and made one believe that purple blood was running through it. On his black head was a mask that covered all parts of his face, which made one wonder if they could see his eyes, if he was breathing, or where his voice was coming from. His arms were extremely long. His height was about 2 meters, but his arms would reach below his knees. At his waist hung countless blood-stained work tools. This demon was a torturer. The collection of the skin parchment is proceeding smoothly. Excellent. Demiurge kindly opened his hand. The parchment that torturer has collected is in excellent condition. Ein-sama would be overjoyed. Thank you very much. Are the sheep healthy? Yes. After the flaying, we immediately cast magic, so we can harvest it again the next day. By the nature of his duties, Torturer was a demon that could use simple healing magic. Yes, to not let people die in peace. I see. Since their cries are melodious, it should be fine to listen to them for a bit longer. Then shall I leave them for a bit before applying healing magic? No, it would be better not to. We get the best parchment from the young ones, and they die immediately without magic. Understood. Yes, magnanimity is important. We have to take care of the sheep. Ha! Demiurge moved his gaze from the bowing torturer. When it reached the next demon he wanted to ask, one of the demons raised her head, and had an expression that said she wanted to ask something. In response, Demiurge nodded, giving her permission. About the parchment, is it fine to not inform Ein-sama about them? That demon was the female demon who informed Eins that the species of sheep was known as the Abelian Tor. Of course, it was by Demiurge's orders to use that name, but she opened her mouth due to fear of being made a scapegoat later. Don't mind it. Enri-sama has said that the goods made using the parchment is extremely important. In actuality, the research and development of consumable goods is a huge problem. Demiurge sent a warm gaze at the parchment placed in a corner of the tent. He had worked together with the sheep's parents to skin it. When he recalled their expressions, he was about to leak a smile. Enri-sama unexpectedly has the generosity to hold mercy for such boring animals, but he understands the importance of this. He must have kept silent about this. Thus I have decided that we should give them a different name so as to not upset him. There is no need for you to worry. Demiurge looked down upon the kneeling figures in front of him and declared as such. The great underground tomb of Nazarick, or Einzulgon-sama, is our holy existence. Such a person lacks scrolls. If he had to have such a dull worry, it would be a sad thing as his subordinates. Yes. If we find another species of animal that can rival the quality of the current ones, shall we end this ranch? Well, complete disposal would be appropriate. Yes. What does our master truly want? The smartest subordinates will always have that in mind and act. Understood? Understood. The female demon acted as their representative and expressed their loyalty. Demiurge nodded gently as if satisfied. Now, next is Succubus. You. I look forward to your good report. Yes. The one who spoke was a human-like woman. Her body was covered by the giant black wings which protruded from her back, and she was mostly naked with only a thin metal plate covering her important parts. Her seductive beauty permeated the air from her face and body, turning the atmosphere a lewd pink. However, her extremely beautiful features were frozen with worry. The interspecies breeding experiments are proceeding smoothly. Unfortunately, since this experiment requires time to see the results, may I request for more time? Of course. As much as you need. The birth of new life is a joyous moment. Actions to achieve that are righteous. Demiurge's expression seemed to be filled with mercy and magnanimity, as if he were a priest spreading the words of his Lord. Succubus sighed in relief but was then spoken to again. However, I have heard rumors that it is not going well? Succubus' shoulders stiffened, and her body shivered as if she had a fever. The demons next to her moved away apprehensively. They feared what would happen next. How about it, Succubus? Are they proceeding smoothly? Ha! I cannot use the word smoothly though. What a bad child. Ah yes, how about offering your love to my image? Demiurge smiled. It was a truly gentle smile. He took one step towards her. The current distance between them was quite large. However, Succubus felt that Demiurge would appear in front of her with just one more step. Succubus knew where her predecessor had went to and she hurriedly formed words. The orcs refused to cooperate. However, I am forcing them to do it using charm magic. I shall produce the results that Demiurge-sama desires. The sense of beauty is different between races after all. The sense of beauty of orcs and goblins was completely different. To orcs, human beauties were the pinnacle of ugliness. That was why interspecies breeding would produce low-quality products. That was why Demiurge enjoyed it. Demiurge loved to hear the screams of pain. Rather than screams from mental damage, he preferred it to be from physical pain. However, he did not hate screams from mental damage. Then would it be better to cast it on the humans? Why, yes, currently, I have casted it on the males. Hearing that tells me that it's going smoothly though? The human spirit is weak. There have been many problems such as self-harm. They could not allow for any form of self-harm like suicide. Unfortunately, there were no demons that could use resurrection magic. Thus the numbers dropped. To avoid that, they had to cooperate with Nazarick, but that would be difficult. So would it not be better to constantly cast magic to lower their intelligence? I like the screams they make when they wake up from the charm though. Understood. Then there was a need to strengthen the nighttime surveillance. Succubus decided as such. However, no matter how much she thought, with the subordinates she was given there would be a hole created somewhere. Succubus braced herself and asked. With the current manpower, it is a bit difficult. Would it be possible to increase the number of subordinates? The air froze and Demiurge's smile only deepened. Succubus shivered but stared at his face. It was the normal smile Demiurge always had. That smile would deepen when he heard something distasteful. I see. Well, if it's interesting I don't mind. Got it, Succubus. I shall increase your subordinates. Demiurge smiled. That was why it was terrifying. Succubus felt that she was in the clear and wiped away her cold sweat. Yes. The minotaurs we caught earlier should be good. Yes. What an excellent suggestion. I have thought about trying to fit them into the plan. Demiurge smiled in satisfaction. I have to be grateful to Ein-sama. I cannot sew such a fun thing in Nazarick. I look forward to going on a picnic in Roble Kingdom. We need more replacements for the dead sheep. Demiurge smiled. I am really happy to be able to expand my ranch. He bowed as if there was someone sitting on the throne. It was a graceful gesture, as if he were a noble working for his king. Overlord First Half Chapter 78, Gaiden, Introduction, Pandora's Actor. The maid, Yuri Alpha, unconsciously heaved a sigh of admiration. The scene that greeted her after the teleportation was a shine that seemed to have all the stars in the night sky. In the center of the giant room was a heaping pile of gold coins and gems, so immense that it resembled a mountain. Several of these 10-meter-tall mountains formed a mountain range. There would be several trillions of coins here. Or maybe more. In addition, there were masterfully made works of art buried in the mountain of gold. A quick glance revealed a golden mug, a scepter encrusted with all manner of gemstones, a crystal pitcher, an animal pelt which emitted a platinum radiance, an exquisitely woven tapestry made with thread of gold, a pearl-colored ocarina, a fan made of rainbow-colored feathers, a crystal jug, an extremely elaborate ring that released a pale light, and a mask made of an animal hide that had black and white jewels embedded inside. Needless to say, they were but the tip of the iceberg. There were hundreds, no thousands more of such articles buried within that gigantic heap of riches. It was a good thing that the easily damaged artwork had protection magic cast on it. While Yuri did think that it would be better to hang it somewhere else, when she looked around her, she found the reason why that was impossible. It was that the surrounding walls were full of treasure equal to or more valuable than those. There were shelves everywhere and the treasures inside were more eye-catching than the mountains of gold. There was a wand socketed with bloodstones, a pair of adamantine gauntlets inlaid with garnets, a small silver ring adorned with black diamonds, an obsidian statuette carved in the shape of a dog, a purple amethyst dagger, a miniature altar with countless small white pearls embedded all over it, a peony made from some glass-like material which scattered light in all the colors of the rainbow, a rose blossom which had been masterfully carved from a star ruby, a tapestry which depicted a soaring black dragon, a crown of platinum which held an enormous diamond, golden censers that were encrusted in gemstones, a mated pair of a male and female lion statuettes, carved from ruby and sapphire respectively, cufflinks which looked like flames and which had fire opals set into them, an intricately carved cigar case made of rosewood, a jacket made of some golden beast's pelt, a dozen plates made of mithril, anklets decorated with gemstones of 4 colors, a grimoire whose cover was made of adamantite, a human-sized statue of a woman which had been carved from gold, a belt with imperial topazes sewn into its material, a chess set whose pieces were all topped in different gemstones, a statuette of a fairy carved from a single piece of emerald, a black cloak that was decorated with countless small gemstones, a drinking horn made from a unicorn's horn, a golden dais that held a crystal ball, and so on. This was but a fraction of the wonders therein. Others included a gilded statue using plenty of emeralds, red crystals that were the size of a man, a gigantic platinum statue of a warrior, a pillar covered in mysterious characters, as well as a gigantic sapphire which one would need both arms to fully embrace. Yuri was surprised by the treasure when a calm voice reached her ears. "Let's go." "Yes." Yuri nodded her head and expressed her agreement. Heinz paid no attention to the mountain of treasure, and activated a mass fly spell, causing the 3 of them to float upwards. When they flew upwards, they could see that the air was tinted a slight purple. Yuri thought that there was something reflecting purple light but could not find anything. While she looked around, she was spoken to in a quiet voice. Yuri nay. Powerful magic toxin in the air. Eh? NN? Blood of Jormungandr? Yuri's gaze fell on another maid who was floating due to Heinz's magic. The other maid was CZ 2128 Delta. AKA Shizu, and she did not speak much at all. Yuri's questioning gaze was met with a freezing stare. The source were the black eyes. There was no amenity in those eyes. To be more accurate, there were no emotions in those eyes. Shizu's face was extremely prim and proper, but it could also be described as an emotionless mask. Automatons like Shizu could not express emotions. Shizu had a Japanese face, as if she were a Yamato Nadeshiko that had a high-class lineage and would be called a princess. Her beautiful hair was pulled upwards and then dropped, and was in the shape known as a ponytail. The maid uniform she was wearing was the same combat maid outfit as Yuri. She wore black arm guards with golden hems and purple runes that went up to her elbows and seemed to be a mixture of gauntlets, counters, vambraces and rear braces. Her leg armor, which seemed to be a mixture of high heels, solarays, greaves and pullings, were made in the same manner as her arm guards. Even the skirt part of the maid outfit had a magic black metal board over it, increasing its defensive properties. The board was an alloy of 3 metals, magically enhanced steel, Adamask metal comprised of mithril and beliat, and a magic metal known as galvol. Her chest piece used the same metal. Of course, the imbued magic was first class. It used data crystals that were rare even amongst the crystals that only level 90 and above Yggdrasil players could acquire. Considering its defensive properties, rather than battle-made clothes, they were more like full plate mail. The choker that sparkled of gems, the rings beneath her greaves, the ribbon holding her ponytail, and her underwear were all first-class magic items. Hanging at her waist like a sword was a strange gun that seemed to be a rounded white Steyr August with 2 magazines. On another note, this gun, automatons and Shizu's class of gunner were all added in the giant update of Fall of Valkyria. Shizu spoke the name of the most potent of poisons. That's correct. I didn't tell you, but the air in the treasury is toxic. Anyone without poison immunity or items granting it will die within 3 steps. Would that be why you chose us to accompany you? The undead Dullahan Yuri and the automaton Shizu both had immunity to poisons. Ein smiled and nodded his head in agreement. He then continued to speak. However, I brought Shizu for more than just that. She is also here for verification. Ainz and his entourage crossed the mountain range of gold with a flight spell, and then they came to the door on the other side. No, was it right to call it a door? It was more of a bottomless black shadow in the shape of a door, affixed to a wall. This is the armory, so what is the password? Ein-sama, if there is an armory, does this mean that there are other treasures stored in other locations? Ah, we do. I had a friend who was really into organization. Everything should be categorized according to use. They should be split into defensive items, staves, wearables, others and crafting materials. And we have a room for data crystals as well. In the direction Ainz pointed, Yuri saw that there were similar black things stuck to the walls. However, they're all located in the same place inside, and it doesn't really matter which direction you enter from. Ainz simply said that, and faced the door of darkness. This was a door which required a certain password to open. Perhaps one could force it open with magic or rogue skills, but Ainz did not know spells like that, not did he have such skills. Thus, he had to speak the password. I forgot. That was only to be expected. There were so many such gimmicks in Nazarick that he would probably only be able to remember a password if it was one he used frequently. However, given that he did not come to the treasury often, he did not remember the password to this door. Since he could not remember the password, Ainz spoke a master password. Einzulgon. In response, the jet-black door displayed a series of words, Asan diatera and coilum, iterum quaed escended interam, et recipivim superiorum et inferiorum. Scythe would note, this is an excerpt from the Emerald Tablet, aka the Tabulus Maragdina. Tabulus really was a perfectionist. Ainz recalled the serious person who designed the gimmick of Einzulgon. He had a hand in designing about 40% of the smaller mechanisms throughout the great underground tomb of Nazarick. His abnormally intricate designs consumed much of Nazarick's free data capacity, which caused the other members to complain about being unable to indulge themselves. Thus, he took responsibility for his actions and paid for many cash items to expand said data capacity. Ainz studied the words which appeared. This must be a hint for the password, but what could it mean? He racked his brains, taking his time to plumb the depths of his mind for the answer. Soon, Ainz finally found the password, which slumbered within his memories. It should be, by this means you shall acquire the glory of the whole world, and so you shall drive away all shadows and blindness, am I correct? As Ainz said this, he looked to Shizu with questioning eyes. Shizu nodded in response to him. She had been made by one of his friends who had worked on different mechanisms from Tabulus Maragdina. Shizu's backstory had been written so that she would be familiar with the bypassing of Nazarick's mechanisms. This was why she could easily solve that password hint. However, Ainz had not asked her for help because he wanted to indulge the selfish desire to open the door through his own efforts. As though in response to Ainz's wishes, the shadow door collapsed into a single point. Soon, the shadow was gone, leaving a fist-sized sphere of blackness floating in the air. Now that the shadow had vanished, one could see into the tunnel that had been left behind. This was an orderly place, completely unlike the previous area. The best way to describe it would be something like a display from a museum. The dimly lit room was very long and stretched ever inward. The ceiling was about 5 meters above the ground, a height which was clearly not designed with humans in mind, while it was about 10 meters from one wall to the other. The ground was made of tightly fit, shiny black stone blocks, and it looked like a single gigantic stone slab. The dim light from the ceiling reflected off of it, causing one to truly feel the silence and solemnity of the place. Neat rows of countless weapons were arrayed on the walls to Ainz's left and right, making an impressive display. "I'm going in." Ainz entered the armory without waiting for his two followers to respond. It was truly an armory. Broadswords, greatswords, estocs, flamberges, scimitars, patah, shuttles, kukris, claymores, short swords, sword breakers, etc., etc. Of course, swords were not the only weapons here. There were one-handed axes, two-handed axes, one-handed bludgeons, javelins, bows, crossbows, etc., etc. Just the types alone were almost uncountable. In addition, there were many unrealistic weapons here that stretched the definition of actually being called weapons. Those were the kind that could not possibly be sheathed, or which were more decorative than useful, and so on. No, these weapons were in the majority. Almost none of them were made of anything as ordinary as mere steel. There was a sword with a blade of blue crystal, a pure white sword with gold inlays and engravings, a black sword with purple runes along its body, and even a bow that seemed to have been strung with pure light. There were countless of them. Then there were other weapons that looked dangerous even at a glance. There was a two-handed axe whose blade constantly dripped fresh blood. Tormented faces appeared and vanished on the black metal of a gigantic mace. There was a lance that resembled human hands clasping each other. And then there were many more weapons like these, in amounts which defied easy counting. One could guess that most of them were magic weapons, but the exact effect each of them had was a mystery. One might be able to guess at the purpose of a sword whose blade flickered like a flame, but it was impossible to know the abilities of a sword whose blade looked like a whip and which wriggled like a centipede. The sound of Ainz's departing footsteps brought her back to reality and Yuri hurried towards him. Slightly behind Yuri was Shizu. She was looking at the surroundings while walking. Her no-mask-like face was a slight red. Before long in the silence, about 200 meters and thousands of weapons later, they reached their destination, which was a rectangular room. There was nothing inside. There were other passages visible to the left and right which looked similar to the one through which Ainz and company had entered. The atmosphere of that way was also dramatically different. If the previous room had been like a museum, then the next one was like a tomb. A large and dark space that the light could not reach spread out before them. The height of the room was about the same as the previous one, but the dim interior extended further in. It was hard to tell due to the angles, but it looked like there was a large niche set into the wall, with something placed within it. What was this place? Yuri narrowed her eyes in wonder, and Ainz spoke with good timing. Within lies the mausoleum. Looking at the puzzled Yuri and the still expressionless Shizu, Ainz looked around. He should be around here. Who? When Yuri made a puzzled face, there was no way that it had responded to Ainz's voice, but from a different path, there was a figure that showed itself to them. That being had a bizarre appearance. While it had a man's body, its head was that of a distorted squid. The right side of its head was half covered in a twisted, tattooed letters, which resembled the ones that had floated up on the door just now. Its skin was like that of a corpse, with purple blotches amidst a ghastly white color, and it was covered in some sort of sticky slime that gave off a bizarre sheen. Webs of skin grew between the long digits of its four-fingered hands. It was the very picture of a heteromorphic character. The 6 twitching tentacles which sprouted from its mouth dangled down to its thighs, and it turned its cloudy blue pupil-less eyes to survey the group. Its body was covered in a shiny, form-fitting black leather outfit studded with silver jewelry. Several belts wrapped around it. Its black cape was closed in front of it, as if to conceal its body. Yuri knew that person. A shout of shock shot out of her mouth. Dabulus Maragdina-sama. This was one of the 41 supreme beings. As a magic caster, he was superior to Ainz in terms of attack power. No. Shizu drew her gun and braced its stock against her shoulder, leveling her muzzle at the person before her. This was an explosive statement, rebellion of one's creator. In addition, pointing a weapon at them was a great sin. If Yuri kept silent about it, she would be considered an accomplice. But... Understood. I'll believe Shizu. Yuri whispered, clenched her fists in front of her chest, and punched her gauntlets together, which made a sound like a ringing gong. Yuri's gauntlets were thicker compared to Shizu's. Shizu used a gun and thus her finger sections were thinner, and Yuri used her gauntlets as weapons. Then, Yuri slid in front of Ainz and Shizu. Ainz was a magic caster while Shizu was a gunner, neither of whom did well in close combat. Then it was Yuri's role to act as their shield and engage in close combat. "Who are you?" The mysterious being who looked like Tabulus Maragdina merely inclined its head at Yuri's question, but did not make any reply. The thin smile that barely existed made Yuri unhappy. However, Ainz revealed his true form. Pandora's actor. Returned to normal. Hearing Ainz's unhappy voice, the figure of Tabulus Maragdina melted. The way it changed reminded Yuri and Shizu of a certain person. Both of them thought of their colleague Narbal Gamma. A male's deep and calm voice could be heard. "It has been a long time, Momonga-sama." Another heteromorphic being stood where the imposter Tabulus Maragdina had been. His shape was something else entirely. His clothes were tidy. A two-button dark suit hugged his thin body. He had a single-cuffed plain white shirt, a silver-gray striped necktie and black leather shoes. He also had white gloves that covered his strangely long forefingers. Its face was flat, with no nose or other facial features. Its mouth and eyes were replaced by 3 empty holes. There were no eyeballs, teeth, or a tongue, just 3 black holes which looked like they had been drawn on by a child with a black marker. The pink, egg-like head was smooth and shiny, without a single hair to mar its surface. His appearance was strange, but there was something unfitting on his face. They were glasses. Although he had no nose nor ears, it was somehow secured to his face. This strange character, and Narbal, were both doppelgangers. His name was Pandora's actor, and he was a level 100 NPC personally designed by Ainz and placed in charge of the treasury. His talents lay in disguise, and he could copy 45 separate forms and even their abilities, though only at 75% of the original's potency. "You seem quite lively." "Yes. I am quite healthy. And may I please ask for what reason have you come here, Momonga-sama? Even bringing the maid ladies over here." Pandora's actor spoke in a much more approachable manner than Narbal. Being called ladies, the pride of being a battle maid flared up in Yuri's heart, but she could not show that to someone close to Ainz. Yuri tried her best to try to find out just what he was from their conversation. Shizu's no mask-like face had small signs of anger on it due to him impersonating her creator. To those who knew her, her anger was at its peak. But if one considered that it was a similar supreme being who gave that ability to Pandora's actor, they could not be angry even if they wanted to. Ignoring the feelings of Yuri and Shizu, Ainz continued his conversation with Pandora's actor. "I was thinking of using some magic items for activation experiments." "Ho! Has the time come to finally use those?" Pandora's actor turned to the mausoleum. Nonchalantly pushed up his glasses with his finger. It was ridiculous to think that it was secured even without a nose or ears that it could even droop. "We will not use any world items, and we will not touch my friend's equipment. We shall leave those alone." "Then at most it would be the artifacts, I presume. That is a pity. I personally wanted to see the power of world items which are said to be able to tear apart worlds. No, if anything goes then I would like to see Touch Me-sama's weapon, the world champion of all time. Ah, then the cup of Hygeia." As Pandora's actor mumbled, he placed his finger on the bridge of his glasses and smiled deviously. The way that the lenses caught light and glinted was quite unnerving. Pandora's actor had a setting of being a magic item fetch, and that could sustain him. Having that be this disgusting was surprising. Ainz recalled the settings he made, and his body twitched slightly in revulsion. Honestly, when they were making everyone, they had gone too far. However, examining it calmly, it was like having the spellbook that one wrote as a kid being read out. This was his black history. If there were other guild members currently in Nazarick, they would be collapsing on the floor and laughing. Ainz felt that. He would not say who, but... "Then I'll just take them. I have to reason to refuse. Everything here belongs to Momonga-sama and the other supreme beings after all." His actions and tone suggested that he were in a play, and he pointed at the surroundings. "Although, it is with a heavy heart that I confess that I was hoping you intended to make use of my abilities, Momonga-sama." Ainz stopped moving, and gave the heteromorph who was pushing up his glasses an evaluating gaze. At one point Ainz had indeed intended to make use of him. Pandora's actor possessed wit and cunning that ranked among the pinnacle of Nazarick's denizens. While he usually applied said intelligence towards strange purposes, it was very difficult to cast aside his wisdom during times of great need. In addition, Pandora's actor possessed very flexible abilities, to the point where he could replace all the other guardians. However, Ainz had not made him for combat or administrative duties, but to preserve the forms of Einzulgon, and the memories of his comrades. You are my final ace in the hole, so I do not intend to use you for petty tasks. I am truly grateful for that. With a look on his face which suggested that he was hesitant to speak, Pandora's actor once more took a deep bow. Understood. Then, I shall continue to manage the treasury from now on. Make me proud. Also, from now onwards, call me Einzulgon. Oh. I hear and obey, my creator, Ainz-sama. With an attitude of ending the conversation, Ainz turned away but heard Pandora's actor's voice. However, Ainz-sama, if you are performing experiments with magic items, would it not be best to use my abilities? In addition, if I take on your figure, I can act without sleep. This will lead to a reduction in the time needed. How about it? Pandora's actor placed a hand on his chest, as if to recommend himself. Shizu, who was standing behind him, made a "ooh" which was heard by Ainz. It's a bit of an overreaction, isn't it? It was a bit over the top. Every nook and cranny of his actions and posture screamed, I am cool. Perhaps such actions would fit him if he was a handsome man, but instead he was an egghead, which made them terribly unfitting. It even made Ainz feel uneasy when he saw him. Ainz silently looked at Pandora's actor for a short time. He had decided on something. Ainz pulled out a ring from his pocket and threw it at Pandora's actor. The ring traced an arc through the air, landing neatly in the hand of Pandora's actor. This is the ring of Einzulgon, and it possesses the ability to. Ainz held up a hand, as though to tell Pandora's actor not to go on. Although he seemed quite disappointed, Ainz decided to pay him no heed. It's a spare. I shall inform Cocytus and his subordinates about you within a few days. Afterwards, come. Understood. Pandora's actor made such a straight bow that even his fingers had stiffened. It was extremely polite, or in other words, it could be taken as an act. Ainz looked at Pandora's actor's egghead and nodded. He was not a bad person. His abilities and personality were not bad. However, why did I design him with such a personality? I used to think this sort of thing was so cool. If Ainz could have blushed, his face would be bright red. Overlord First Half Chapter 79, Gaiden, Nazarick's Guardian Orichan. The sixth floor of Nazarick, the floor that Aura ruled, boasted of the widest area in Nazarick. It was a square 4 kilometers wide, and the center held a large lake. Most of the area was not a forest but a jungle, and plains only took up a 20th of the area. Standing alone in the center was a coliseum, and next to that was building that held the steps to the 7th floor. If one looked for any other man-made constructions, it would be the loghouse that Aura had built for holding prisoners. Then where did the ruler Aura sleep? In the jungle? In the Colosseum? In the building that was the entrance to the 7th floor? All were wrong. Inside the jungle was an area that could be called Aura's residence. There was an wide area that dominated the primeval forest. In that was a large eye-catching tree. It was over 40 meters, as if it were piercing the skies. The trunk, even with its height, was far too thick and disproportionate. Inside that strangely large tree, that was where Aura stayed. The inside of the hollowed-out tree had 2 underground floors and 8 above, for a total of 10. If one stepped in, they would be greeted by a simplicity like in the loghouse, but a warm scene spread out before them. In the past, when Aura's creator Bukabakushigama was around, there were several guests who visited. They were the female members of Einzulgon, such as Yamaiko and Ankoromoki Mochi, along with the subordinates they created. Seeing them have their warm conversations was a scene that Aura was used to. Aura often sat on Bukabakushigama's lap. However, currently, Aura basically stayed here alone. Most of Aura's immediate subordinates were monster types, and none of them were humanoid or could help her with the house. Aura had never thought of such a life as lonely. Appearance-wise, Aura was certainly a child. However, as a guardian, there was no reason to feel lonely. The reason for that was that while the gods that created her existed, there was no one like her parents. There was no reason for her to feel that her life was lonely. However, she thought that many aspects of her daily life was a chore. Of course, this was the place that was given to her by the supreme beings and thus she would not complain. However, Aura loved the outside and thus cleaning was mentally tiring. That was the reason for a dark part of the room to be a bit messy. Aura's day-to-day life was without a schedule. She had plenty of chances for sleep and free time, but would often be active without sleep. She was not someone like Demiurge or Shaltir who did not need sleep, but she could act without sleep by using fatigue-relieving magic. She also had items that eradicated those needs. Thus her true personality was that she indulged in sleep, ignoring all housework, being quite slack. However, it was true that she had received an item from Ainz that was working to remove that laziness. Aura's room had less furniture than one expected. It would not be an overstatement to say that it was empty. The thin carpet on the floor was a plain brown. This room would cause one to question whether or not its occupant was a girl. However, one could at least tell that this was a girl's room. This was due to the items placed around the room. They were the large plushies in the room. There were 2 or 3 bears, rabbits, deers bathing in the sunlight. Some were even chibi versions. Due to those, people that would decide that this was not a girl's room were few. Well, it was true that apart from the plushies there was almost nothing else that could be used to tell that this was a girl's room. In that room was a high-hanging hammock, and Aura was sleeping inside with a defenseless face. She made the occasional happy face that made one wonder what sort of dreams she was having. It was a really childish face. She was wearing a pair of pink and white patterned cotton pajamas, and a pink towelette was lightly covering her body. One wondered until when this gentle time would continue, but it was true that there was something made to break this atmosphere. It's 8 o'clock. A female's voice that was not Aura's rang out in the room. Her long black ears twitched and Aura opened her eyes wide. She then adjusted the band wrapped around her wrist. Then from on top of the hammock, Aura sluggishly gazed at the ceiling. "You-oo-oh." Yawning, Aura looked at the ceiling for a bit and then closed her eyes again. This was the moment that her desire for sleep defeated her will to wake up. And Aura then again made her angel-like smile, however there was something that had to break that atmosphere. The door was knocked on with a con-con. Aura's eyes opened again as she yawned. "Aura-sama, it is time." The voice from behind the door was a female's. Aura frowned unhappily. "Ooh. May I enter the room?" "Ooh, nope." Aura replied half-heartedly and removed the towelette covering her body. Whoa. She tumbled from the hammock. Of course, she moved her body in midair and landed on her feet. Aura scratched her head with her messy hair and wore her slippers. With a pita-pita, she walked towards the bear doll next to the wall and petted it. The bear plushie was sitting in a manner that caused its short legs to be spread out, and shook slightly due to the hand pressing on it. Its large chibi-headed round black eyes and a mouth that was sewn into a smile. It had short and misfitting claws that sparkled in the light. As it moved beneath her hand, it seemed to be bowing to her. Yama-iko's forest friends. The door next to those plushies was opened by Aura. Standing there was a female elf in maid clothes. Her ears were originally cut off as proof of slavery but they were completely healed now. Aura could only use simple healing magic and thus could not heal her, so she asked Pestania to use powerful healing magic. The exuberated figure of the elf at that time caused Aura to be slightly taken aback. How happy could a person be by having her ears healed? The maid's clothes she wore were given by the head maid Pestania and was the same as the clothes the regular maids wore. It was made of first-class cloth, but the defensibility compared to Sabos battle maids was lacking. It was at best enchanted to be a round mithril full-plate male. "Good morning, Aura-sama." "Ah, good morning." While replying to the bowing elf with a yawn, Aura walked past her. The elf followed. "Now, I'm just changing my clothes so you don't have to accompany me." "No, I shall help." "I'm not a child you know?" Aura frowned in dissatisfaction. This was a conversation she had many times. Even Aura would have her mood dampened. She did not know why but the elves were looking after her to a strange extent. To the point that she felt that they were going too far. Whether she was brushing her teeth or eating her food, they would always try to help her. And they would always grumble when she did not enter the bath for a while. If she did they would offer to wash all the way to her ears and would try to enter with her. It was a bit annoying. That was Aura's evaluation of the elves. However, she recognized that this was an expression of loyalty, no matter how excessive, and thus did not kill them. However, where did this strange loyalty come from? Aura did not understand. This elf was one of the survivors from the invasion a few days ago. Ainz did not mind if they lived or died and left all of them to their nearest kin, the dark elf Aura. Aura did not mind if they were killed or not, and there were no elves in Nazarick. And there was another reason why they were saved. They had believed that the elves would offer their loyalty due to their gratitude, but it seemed that it was different. While tilting her head, she had no intention to ask further. She thought it was troublesome. However, the coordination of Western clothes. I'll wear what I always wear. However. What? Are you looking down on the clothes that Bukabakushigama-sama selected? Without moving her head, Aura gazed up at the elf. The fear in the elf's expression became stronger. If nothing else was said, then Aura would win. However, the elf had a painful counter. However, was it not Bukabakushigama-sama who placed other clothes in this room? Goo. Is it fine to not wear other clothes? Aura's expression visibly hardened. What the elf was speaking of was the countless number of clothes in the dresser. Aura basically preferred battle-ready clothes and weapons. She did not like dresses like Shaltir did. However, that dresser was filled with extravagant dresses and feminine clothes. This was not collected by Aura but instead by Bukabakushigama, and was the remnants of the time that she used Aura as a dress-up doll. Some were even for plushies. If one thought about wearing clothes like that, it was certainly something Aura should do. Aura hesitated, and spoke depressingly. I have a lot of things to do, so not today. But other times. I'll wear them. Yes. Understood. Now about today's breakfast. It's fine, food. If I have fruits I can be full. That must not be done, Aura-sama. If you do not eat well you will not grow. Growth, eh? Aura's gaze fell on the elf's chest. I feel like I won't. Elves do not gain much meat after all. However, species like wild elves are different, and so are dark elves as well, right? Do I have a future? Probably. Aura thought about various things, and lastly about Shaltir. An evil smile appeared on Aura's face. Well then it can't be helped. Prepare breakfast. I'll come after I change. After breakfast, Aura went outside while holding her slightly bulging stomach. Aura was a light eater and there was an enormous amount of food. It was to the point that one wondered where it all came from. The answer was Bastania. The weather today was clear, with a slight wind from the southeast. As if invited by the weather, Aura's sleepiness returned, but she suppressed it. Pooh. Aura made a painful sigh as she had to move. She was currently in an open space in front of the giant tree. Outside of the open space was the overwhelming figure of the jungle. Aura looked around. As if this were a signal, a black giant beast slowly appeared from behind the tree. It looked like a black wolf but its tail was that of a snake. Its body length was about 20 meters. Its collar caught the sunlight and sparkled. Fenrir. The strongest and highest level beast amongst Aura's subordinates. It was based off of the Fenrir of Norse mythology, and had special abilities for specialize in close combat, and had quite the firepower. That majestic Fenrir had on the expression of a puppy and danced towards Aura. Its giant face moved close to Aura. While its giant body had a massive amount of power, Aura did not move. This was not because Fenrir was controlling his power, but that Aura's physical ability was higher. I said I'm ticklish. Rather than petting she was hitting him, Aura rubbed Fenrir's large head. Fenrir growled in pleasantness. Aura felt like she was handling a large child, recalled something and stopped her hand. Wait for a bit, I have to feed that child. Fenrir made an astonished expression. He cried. It was like a puppy that wanted to be spoiled, and like a child sulking. However, Aura showed no sign of engaging with him, causing him to draw away and fall to the ground like a puppy. Aura made a wry smile, and called for the animal that she had to feed. Rororo. Come here. As if drawn by her voice, a snake appeared from the trees. When it saw Aura it was extremely happy, but stopped its movements halfway. It then moved back slowly. Question mark. Aura looked strangely at Rororo. She wondered if anything happened. What's wrong? She spoke again. While hiding behind a tree, Rororo stared at Aura. No, it was probably not looking at Aura. Noticing that, Aura turned back to Fenrir behind her. Fenrir was looking back with a blank stare. It seemed to have no interest whatsoever. However, there was no way that Aura with her supreme vision would let that slip by. Fenrir. You can't look at Rororo like that. Fenrir jumped in surprise after hearing Aura's shout. It then growled like a puppy. Yes, as if it were a puppy whose master saw it sending a hostile gaze to Rororo. Come here, Rororo. Once again. Aura showed itself while quivering in fear. Aura suddenly took out a giant fish out of midair. However, that fish was far too large. Rather than an animal, it was like a giant fish from out of a manga. She then moved it towards the approaching Aura. Aura began to eat that fish, a strange fish without bones or innards, with his 4 heads. Aura smiled happily, but Fenrir looked dissatisfied. Aura's direct subordinates like Fenrir all had items that prevented them from needing to eat food, and thus did not have to be provided food. However, Aura had no such equipment and thus it needed sustenance. Even though Aura liked to slack, she was not so lazy that she would forget to feed the animals that she demanded to be brought over. This strange fish did not swim in the water. Using 1 gold coin, some would be create from the pot. In Yggdrasil, there was the idea of self-sufficiency. Monsters and NPCs that were not could not be placed. However, there was a method to ignore that. This was the pot that Aura bought fish from, the pot of Digza. If one used it for long term, they would lose money, but they could deploy monsters that were not self-sufficient. On the other hand, the majority of monsters in Nazarick were undead that needed no food, and thus the situation could be maintained indefinitely. There was another reason apart from that though. Thus currently, for the new recruits, like the lizard men or elves and those who would arrive in the future, they had to search for a method to give them food. Aura rubbed one of Aura's eating head. Fenrir frantically suppressed its slow growl. In that strange scene, Aura began to talk excitedly with Aura. Today your owner will be coming here. Did it understand our words? One of Aura's heads stopped eating and stretched out towards Aura. If it tightly wound around her, the contents of her stomach would be in trouble, but there was no problem with touching her. Aura smiled. I said we can't play. It's cold. Aura. This smoothness. Something about it. A Tsuvek type might be good. While Fenrir waved its tail to appeal to Aura, she stroked Aura's long neck. Now, you have to eat. We can play afterwards. In front of Aura and Aura, Fenrir suddenly ran off and disappeared into the trees. Ah, is he angry? But he's mean to Aura so it can't be helped. Aura made a devilish smile and looked at the back of Fenrir. The open space in front of the tree that Aura lived in, had the figures of several people sitting within and monsters sitting behind them. However, the wideness of the space made them seem extremely small. 10 were lizardmen. There was Brain the vampire swordsman, 3 elves in maid's clothes and Pinison and several other dryads. And 3 treants with wood for limbs. In front of that, Aura stood behind the desk like a teacher, and spoke with pride. Now, we am thinking of explaining the greatness of Nazarick to you. Everyone applauded at once. The timing of it was without flaw, as if well practiced. Aura nodded once at the applause, and raised her hand, stopping the applause. First I shall begin with how Nazarick was founded. After the silence returned, Aura spoke again. A long time ago. There were 41 people who were equal to gods, they were the 41 supreme beings. Remember this. They appeared. Nazarick was originally not such a deep dungeon like this. It was created by them who had great power. It's natural. They created it to make it such a suitable place. Thus the current great underground tomb of Nazarick with 10 floors was born. Next the supreme beings created those that would reside there. Even though they had created such a large place, it was filled with mere low-class undead, and thus they decided to create beings that would rule in their place. Of course, the supreme beings could easily do it themselves, you know? But they cannot be doing such menial tasks. They had more important things to do. And thus, Aura cut off her words here. She then puffed up her chest with pride. We, the Guardians, were born. She looked at her audience. Silence returned and no one tried to speak. Aura raised an eyebrow. It was true that they had to be serious. While she was talking about the most important subject, if they took a lackadaisical attitude, Aura would not hesitate to take care of them. However, this silence was not what Aura was hoping for. We the Guardians were thus born. Then once again, she puffed up her chest. The lizardmen, elves and Brain faced at each other. They were trying to understand what Aura was waiting for. Ooh! Amazing! Several people growled out in amazement and several others spoke words of praise. Ho-ho! Aura's excitement could easily be seen in her eyes. Yes. The Guardians are myself, Demiurge, Cocytus, and Shaltir. Well, and one more? It exists, but it is not a guardian created by the Supreme Beings, so we'll exclude it for now. Now, The supreme beings who created the Guardians decided to create those who would work for them. There is no way that simple subordinates or monsters could possibly help the supreme beings. Thus those that could serve the supreme beings were chosen. Thus Sabas and Pestania were born, along with the head librarian, interrogation officer, musician, blacksmith, and administrator, completing Nazarick. Aura stopped here. This was as the part from here on out was the most important. Feeling parched, she took a swig of the water placed on the desk. Now after creating Nazarick, the supreme beings often went on journeys. Every time they returned, they filled the treasury with valuables. You might be thinking, why did they do that? But the things the supreme beings seek are impossible to understand by normal people. Those were world items. The supreme beings were searching for such powerful items of that name, that even they could not easily create. However, there were fools who dared to envy the supreme beings. Aura's voice deepened slightly. There were countless times people tried to invade Nazarick. They often aimed for the treasury, but they had never reached there. Until that day. Aura made a childlike face full of anger and disgust. This change shocked everyone. Even if Aura changed her expressions, she would never make a face full of anger. The ones who knew this best were the elves. Thus her making such a face was an abnormal situation. This caused them to be scared. Those that envied the supreme beings, those that wielded equal power to them, 1,500 of them joined forces and attacked Nazarick. It was a fierce battle. Shaltira was torn apart, Cocytus was sliced to pieces, and I myself. Silence fell. However, despite the silence, the air was shaking. This was due to the shock that the lizardmen and Brain, who knew the strength of the Guardians, felt. Aura, Shaltir, Cocytus, Demiurge. While weaker than Nines, the strength of the four Guardians were outside of common sense. While Aura seemed to be a cute young girl, a wave of her hand can easily kill Brain and destroy several lizardman villages. They understood this at a basic level. An existence that could defeat a Guardian. How could 1,500 such people exist? They could not keep up with the destruction of the power balance in their heads. Ignoring the confusion of several people, no, she did not even think of it, or spoke again. Demiurge was of course destroyed. However, Aura smiled. However, it was a cruel smile that did not suit Aura. The 8th floor. An unknown floor that even we Guardians do not know. There, all 41 of the supreme beings waited there for their challengers. 1,000 or 1,200 beings reached there, but they were all torn apart at the hands of the supreme beings. Aura again puffed up her chest. After saying that we fought well, the Guardians were revived and Nazarick returned to being a supreme ground. This is the history of Nazarick where you now work. Aura finished talking and silence fell. Would the lecture end here or continue? There was a strange atmosphere. Suddenly, someone clapped and pierced through the silence. All those present faced that person and they all gasped in shock. Amazing. A person who would clap while saying that. When was such a person here? That person was one of the Guardians, and was the Supreme Commander in Nazarick, Demiurge. Demiurge's eyes were filled with unknown tears and they spread to his cheeks. Next to him was the platinum sparkling Cocytus. And Shaltir who was wearing a black dress. Cocytus shook his head in deep emotion. Shaltir wiped her eyes with her handkerchief. Amazing. Truly amazing. They clapped in unison. A fear like an animal being chased was also included in their action. The lizardmen and Brain had fear on their faces, the elves panicked, and the treants and the dryads did not fully understand the situation, but they all clapped together. Sorry, Aura. Can I handle the rest? N? Sure. My part is over. Demiurge did not wipe away the tears on his face and stood next to Aura. He then raised his hand. All applause stopped. Everyone, I believe that you understand just how amazing Einzulgon is. It was difficult to understand his weeping voice, but all those excluding the Guardians did their best to listen. If they let a single word slip through, it might be bad for them. Thus they were on ease. Now, it is extremely fortunate to yourselves that you belong to such an amazing place. So show the gratitude of receiving such fortune by offering everything to Nazarick. Demiurge looked around the room and continued. Any questions? The students looked at each other, and as if representing the lizardman, Zarusu raised his hand. Yes, Zarusu. Aura pointed to him like a teacher. Yes. Zarusu stood up. He then spoke. There are 41 supreme beings, however I have yet to meet anyone but Ein-sama. Would it be possible to meet them? The Guardians paused for an instant and looked at each other. Sensing that strangeness, Zarusa felt like he was in danger. However, Aura began talking as if to remove that fear. Currently Ein-sama is the only supreme being here in Nazarick. We do not know where or why the others have went. We believe that it is for a reason that even we Guardians fail to understand. However, the fact that Ein-sama remained means that the others will definitely return. Ein-sama aims to spread the name of this land to make it much easier for the others to find. Now, any more questions? Confirming that no one else raised their hands, or nodded. Okay. Then dismissed. After Aura told the story of Nazarick, the remaining Guardians stayed behind to grasp each other's situation and sat at a table. 4 cups were placed on top of the round table. Steam rose from them and one could smell the scent of red tea. Of course even Shaltir had a cup. There was no meaning for her to drink anything but blood, and she did not like it, but the word accompaniment was in her vocabulary. Demiurge raised the cup of red tea and narrowed his eyes in enjoyment of the smell. This is a nice smell. Matching this would be. Demiurge stopped talking. His handsome face had traces of remorse on it. Cocytus understood what Demiurge wanted to say and allowed him to do so. I do not mind Demiurge. Apologies, Cocytus. The words that Demiurge were about to say would upset Cocytus. There was no need to hide his hobbies, but he did not intend to upset the other Guardians. Thus Demiurge apologized. Elves can surprisingly do it as well. True. Cocytus drank the red tea from the cup by pouring it down his throat. Aura tasted it, and was not satisfied with the taste. She dropped 2 sugar cubes from the pot into the cup. By the way, Aura? While looking at Aura, who was focusing on stirring her cup, Shaltir asked. What? What is that? Aura looked in the direction Shaltir pointed at, and nodded. There was a doll placed in the corner of the room. It was a long-eared human, probably an elf, with her sword drawn, riding a chibi lion. Of course, this was as large as a human. Akemi-chan. Shaltir's eyes widened in surprise at Aura's response. It was natural. Those that could understand just from this were not normal people. It is the image of Yamaiko-sama's younger sister. It should be the strongest amongst Yamaiko's forest friends? She had a younger sister? Yup. Seems so. But she was an elf and could not be one of Ein-sama's companions. That was one of the reasons that elf was saved. Because of the existence of Akemi-chan, she felt pity for her. It seems this is a sad story. True. Because their figures were different, she could not become part of Nazarick, no Einzulgon. A tragic story. Indeed. In contrast to the pondering Guardians, Aura recalled the period when Yamaiko was around and could not remember any sad atmosphere. Now, I wonder what is in the 8th floor. Shaltir changed the conversation as if to avoid any sad conversation. She did not expect to gain an answer. But I know. Eh? Then tell me, Cocytus. Surprised, Shaltir pressed the conversation, but Cocytus thrust his hand out at Shaltir. However, if Ein-sama did not say, that is something that we are fine not knowing. Moo. But. Goo. Shaltir had nothing to say since Ein's name had come up. Ein-sama's trump card is probably in there. It's true that we lost in that battle. Not just that. It is also probably to destroy us should we decide to become turncoats. All the Guardians excluding Demiurge all felt the air shake. What? Us turning our backs on Ein-sama, one of the supreme beings. Ein-sama is an extremely intelligent person. I believe it is one of the reasons why he had me work with Sabas when we went out on the expedition. What does that mean? It's simple. He was checking on myself and Sabas. What would we do out of his sight? Cocytus, Shaltir and Aura looked at each other. In response, Demiurge made a wry smile. Could we please stop this? I am not thinking of betraying Ein-sama or the supreme beings. That is natural. Of course. Could we betray the supreme beings who created us? Of course. Betrayal is not even a joke. However, the fact that Ein-sama is thinking like this, he must have some proof, right? Such as Demiurge or Sabas betraying him. An air of panic started to raise from the table. To those who were created by Einzulgon, betrayal was impossible. All of them had believed in this. It was natural. Would it be forgiven for them to spit upon the gods that created them? Their raison d'etre was to work for their supreme beings. However, they felt shock at their comrades who might plan to betray the supreme beings. This shock was not from their loyalty to Ainz being questioned, but was instead aimed at those who caused Ainz to think so, like Sabas and Demiurge. "It is your fault that our loyalty is being questioned," or something along those lines. It is not clear why Ainz-sama thinks that way. Cocytus. I shall go to the capital. What? What do you mean? To protect Ainz-sama. Silence fell upon them. They understood the meaning in Demiurge's words. Sabas is strong. If he dragonifies, he is the strongest close combatant in Nazarick. Shouldn't we all go? Demiurge shook his head. If we do not all go, Ainz-sama will be at a loss. He is kind. Yup, right. True. From the perspective of the Guardians, if something was suspicious, then it should be destroyed. It was difficult for them to accept the continued existence of a person whose loyalty to Ainz was in question. At the same time, they were touched by the kindness that Ainz did not immediately execute that person, causing them to raise cries of joy. Basically, it is to confirm it? True. But how? A true fight with Sabas is enticing. But it cannot be forgiven. Cocytus, it's different. Even though Ainz-sama is at a loss, we cannot simply decide this by ourselves. Ah, true. Apologies, everyone. The Guardians quickly accepted Cocytus' apology. Demiurge, then, is there anything we can do? True. If there is anything Aura and I can do, please tell us. No, nothing in particular. If Sabas actually betrayed us, we might need all of the Guardians, but I believe this is all a misunderstanding. It would be nice. He is too kind. If that falls in a strange direction, that would not be impossible. Cocytus slowly stood up. There was nothing left in his cup. Where to? I think it would be best to ready my weapons. Understood. Preparation is important. While looking at the leaving Cocytus, Shaltir spoke to Demiurge. Take care. If Ainz-sama is harmed despite the Guardians being there, that will be the greatest sin. Of course, I understand. Cocytus and I shall never let that happen. While enjoying the smell of the red tear, Demiurge narrowed his eyes. It was the face of someone not enjoying the tea, but instead thinking of something else. Overlord First Half Chapter 80, Gaiden, Dear Best Enri-san. Part 1. Enri wiped away the sweat on her brow with the only part of her hand that was not dirty, and collected the plucked herbs. The feeling of her clothes that had absorbed the sweat of a whole day's worth of field work was quite disgusting. Enri paused, leaned back and stretched. A section of the field came into view. It was filled with stalks of raw. Since the harvesting season began, the grains had slowly turned golden. Seeing the entire field become a golden color was a great feeling, but it always caused a tinge of annoyance, since harvesting it would be extremely troublesome. She had worked hard for it to get to this point. Stretching allowed her tensed-up body to relax, causing her body to become soft. It felt very cooling with the wind blowing. The blowing wind brought the noise from the bustling village to Enri. The sound of things hitting one another, the shouts of people working together, and other sounds that were usually inaudible. The village was currently in the midst of several projects. The most prominent amongst them was the large wall they were building around the village, along with watchtowers. Basically, the village was turning into a fortress. This was the plan that the goblin leader and goblin mage proposed. In the current state, the village had no way of responding to attacks. The village was built on a flat plain with an open area in the center. There were no fences of any sort, allowing anyone to enter easily. While it was close to the forest, no monsters had appeared nearby. However, after that tragedy occurred, no one had thought that this would be good. However, no one could answer the question of whether they would be safe even after building such fences. Then the goblins appeared. The plan that the goblins proposed of turning the village into a fortress was immediately approved. They simply could not forget the nightmare. They began to take apart several houses to make the village smaller. The village right now was too large, and thus it would take a large wall to surround the village, and it would be difficult to build it with the current number of villagers. Thus they removed houses to shorten the circumference. The main reason for this was that a large number of villagers were killed, and many houses were empty. First they took apart the extra houses and used the extra wood to build the wall. Of course that was not enough, thus they looked to the forest for wood. There was the possibility of being attacked by monsters, but the patrols of the goblin troop easily solved that problem. However, it would be a huge challenge to not only cut wood, but also dig holes for support and to transport the wood. How would they do this? The answer to this was a deal with the ruler of Nazarick, Ainz. It seemed that Ainz wanted to collect gold coins, and would thus provide labor for coins. Of course, this was something Enri also hoped for. Despite being a simple village girl, Enri did not understand which such a powerful person such as Ainz would pay attention to her. At best she would guess that when she and her sister were invited for a meal, she had left an excellent impression. However, she did not understand how Ainz felt like that despite the few conversations they had then. Thus they had worked out the details with Ainz, but when he was asked why he wanted to collect coins. Having you own coins that are not used in the surrounding countries would only bring yourselves trouble. That was his answer. It was to avoid drawing the attention of those who seeked rare coins. It was an understandable answer. If that possibility existed, then it would be best to let it go. And the only one to come up with that idea was Ainz. Thus Ainz proposed to exchange coins for labor. The labor that Ainz offered was 3 giant statues known as stone golems. They were about 3 meters in height. They were humanoid, but just barely. Their arms were long, and their legs short. It was as if a child had tried to draw a gorilla. They believed that they were strange dolls. There were several villagers who raised complaints. They felt that they were given nothing for their coin. However, most of the villagers believed that such a powerful magic caster would definitely have given them an equal exchange for their coins. Even the goblins were amazed at the golems that Ainz provided. When the golems were activated, the villagers that complained turned red, and felt ashamed of their short-sightedness. In addition, the opinion of Ainz the village savior went up. The golems did not tire, and silently followed orders. In addition, they had power that no human had. They lacked finesse and could not handle delicate work, but the amount of time they cut down was unbelievable. Some of those that saw this, felt a strong hatred due to their jealousy. Due to the golems' unceasing work, the construction of the wall continued at a fast pace. Work that would have taken several months were finished in several days. In addition, they could construct a longer wall for a wider village. Not only the wall, the watchtowers were being built quickly as well. The east and west watchtowers would be completed soon. With the construction, the villagers' vigilance towards the goblins nearly disappeared. Especially when one of the reasons being that most of the villagers were killed by knights of their same species. Their lives were lost to the same species. In comparison, the goblins, who were of a different race, worked as Enri's subordinates. They were thus thought to be more reliable than humans. And more importantly, they were strong. Even if wounded, there was a priest to heal them. The goblins were thought of as warriors. Like this, in a few days, the goblins became an irreplaceable existence to the village. One could understand this just by looking at where they lived. Disregarding the fact that they were not human, they were living in a specially constructed house, near Enri's. When Enri thought about returning to the village after hearing that noise. Enri no Ansan, I finished up my part. The goblin that was picking herbs with Enri told her that he was finished. Thank you very much. No, this is nothing much. He was a goblin that was waving his herb-stained hand, but Enri felt that no matter how much she thanked them, it would never be enough. To Enri, who had lost her father and mother, working the fields was hard for her. Originally she would have asked for help from the other villagers, but their number had fallen, and all the farmers had their hands full. However, having the goblins help her solved that problem. In addition, the goblins offered their help to those who were short of it. Could they continue to shun the goblins after this? Would it not be better to have goblins as their neighbors rather than humans, the villagers in Carney village though? Their opinion of the goblins was so high that the thought became commonplace. Enri stretched her back once more and looked to the sky. Although the lunch bell had not rung yet, it seemed like it was about time. They had worked enough of the field to take a break as well. Then, shall we have lunch? Despite his smashed-looking face, the goblin managed what was instantly recognizable as a smile. That would be great, your meals are always delicious, Enri no Ansan. Oh, they're not that great. Enri replied, slightly embarrassed. No, I'm serious. Helping you in the fields is one of the most hotly contested positions among ourselves. That's because we get to eat your delicious lunches, Ansan. Then, should I make it for everyone? Making food for 3 people was the same as making it for over 20. Not. The time needed to stoke the fire, the time to cook the food and the effort needed was easily 7 times larger. However, the goblins had been doing their best for her, so this was not a large problem for her. Oh, no, we couldn't impose on you like that. Enjoying your handmade lunch is something like a bonus for the one who wins the right to help you, Ansan. Enri made a wry smile at the small demi-human who was giving off an air of superiority. She knew that the goblins were deciding who to help Enri using scissors paper stone, but she raised an eyebrow to hear that her food was so highly evaluated. Then, shall we go back and eat? Sounds great. The goblin's words cut off halfway as he looked to the distance with his keen eyes. With a deep breath, the formerly relaxed and cheerful little demi-human became a veteran warrior in an instant. Enri followed his eyesight into the distance. They saw a goblin riding a black wolf. They seemed to glide across the plain as they approached the village at high speed. It's Enri-san. Among the goblin troop that Enri had summoned, there were 12 level 8 goblins, 2 level 10 goblin archers, 1 level 10 goblin mage, 1 level 10 goblin cleric, 2 level 10 goblin riders and 1 level 12 goblin leader, for a total of 19 goblins. The one in front of Enri was a level 8 goblin, while the one heading here, mounted on a black wolf, wearing leather armor and carrying a lance, was a level 10 goblin rider. The goblin rider's job was to patrol the plains and act as scouts. The riders periodically returning to the village to deliver reports were a common sight. Looks like it. However, the goblin's tone was very somber. It made her think that something bad had happened. What's wrong? He's back a little early. He should have been patrolling the forest today. Did something happen? Hearing the goblin's explanation, Enri felt unease well up in her. It was the unease that another bloody battle would occur. While the two were silent, the goblin riding the giant wolf ran towards them. The wolf was breathing heavily, and made it clear how much of a rush they were in to get back. What's the matter? Hearing the goblin's question, the rider bowed to Enri from on top of his wolf while replying. Something's happened in the forest. What? I'm not too sure. A whole bunch of unknown guys are moving towards the north. Are they knights? Enri unwittingly interrupted the two of them. Even though she was powerless to change anything, she still could not ignore the conversation. She still could not forget her fear when the village had been attacked. Enri no Aunt-san, I apologize for not coming down. I am not confident of this but I believe that it incorrect. They made a road by cutting down trees, but I saw traces of them walking barefoot, and do not think that they are human. Is that so? There was no human that would walk in the wild barefoot. It was natural, a human's soles are not that hard. Hearing that answer, Enri candidly heaved a sigh of relief. Then, I'd better go report to leader. All right. Good job. Thank you for your hard work. After waving to the two of them, the rider spurred his wolf on and departed. Enri and the goblin watched him enter the slowly opening village doors. Then, shall we go back, too? Yes, let's. After washing their hands beside the well, Enri and the goblin had just reached home when they heard a young girl's voice. Welcome back, One-chan. The voice was accompanied by the sound of rock grinding against rock. Following the sound to its source, Enri saw a 12-year-old girl turning a millstone behind the house. She was Enri's younger sister Nemu. A pungent smell came from the millstone. Although it was similar to the smell that had clung to Enri's hands just before, it was several times more intense, enough that one could smell it from some distance away. Nemu was used to the smell, which was all well and good, but Enri's eyes almost teared up as the odor assaulted her. The goblin, standing behind her, seemed unaffected in comparison. It remained to be seen whether that was because the smell only had an effect on certain species, or because it would be terribly rude to make a face like that to his mistress' little sister. I'm home. How's things? Have you ground them all up yet? I did. Have a look. Enri looked along Nemu's line of sight, and saw that the herbs that she had piled up before leaving the house had been reduced to a small handful. But One-chan, there's not much more left. Nemu's job was to turn the herbs into a paste and pour it into a jar. That was because some herbs had to be dried to be preserved, but others needed to be shredded to be preserved. Is that so? Then we have to get more. Herbs made up a major portion of Carney Village's income. No, apart from that, they had almost nothing. It was true that for food, they could make do with what they grew, but making a profit from other things like clothes was impossible. However, the herbs could only be acquired in the forest, where the chance of encountering monsters was high. It was not a place that a simple village girl like Enri could go. Can I ask it of you? That was why she spoke to the goblin who bowing towards Nemu. The great forest was a place that was filled with danger, but there were also places inside that granted blessings of resources to the villagers of Carney Village. Such as kindling, as well as food such as fruits, plants and animals, and various herbs. In a way, It was a mountain of treasure, but due to the existence of monsters, there was the chance of attracting monsters to the village and was not a place that they could enter lightheartedly. Thus it was basic for those who were confident like hunters, and specialists with experience, to head inside occasionally. However, currently the goblins were doing that. The goblins' work was excellent, and they could now easily get fresh meat and had fresh fruits and vegetables on the table. The quality of their dining had improved considerably. It should be alright, but it might be a little difficult for you to come with us, Enri-san. Why's that? Enri made an inquisitive face at the goblin, making a wry smile. These were the words of the rider from before, but it seems that a large number of them are heading north. Ah, yes. If that is the case, it will turn into pandemonium. The forest will. ? Enri once again made an curious face, and the goblin then explained. Even the cautious ones are going to want to expand their territory. If that's the case, then for a while, their territory is going to overlap with the others, and that's going to cause all sorts of confusion. Simply put, the chances of meeting a monster is going to increase, and so will the danger. And if you're unlucky, you might even run into something outside the forest. We know you're brave and cool, but there's no need to walk into danger, Enri-san. Is that so? I'm not too sure about the brave and cool part, but that's probably just the goblins being polite, Enri thought. However, this is bad. We cannot harvest the herbs anytime but now. Thus, despite the danger, I would like to. She smiled at the worried Nemu. She wanted to avoid any actions that would sadden her last family member. However, she did not want to let any chance of profit slip by. It might be true that her priorities were skewed. However, she had to pay back the debt of gratitude she had towards her subordinates for risking their lives for the village. Enri made her firm decision, but the goblin thrust his hand out. Although this is just my personal opinion, how about discussing the matter with leader? You don't need to make the decision so early, Enri-san. I don't want to be scolded by the boss because I opened my mouth without thinking. Is that so? The two, Enri and the goblin, talked as if Enri accompanying them into the great forest was decided, but that was usually strange. All she needed to do was to ask the goblins, who could take care of themselves, to go into the dangerous great forest on her behalf. However, the goblins she had summoned had a strange weakness. That was to say, they had no aptitude at all for herb picking, butchering animals, and that sort of work. Even if one handed goblins a sample of a herb, they would not be able to match it up with identical herb in front of them. The surprising thing was, it was as though they were born unable to do that sort of thing, or even learn it. It was as if someone had removed the capacity to do so from them. Therefore, if they were assigned to pick herbs, the goblins needed to have a non-goblin with them. Enri was the one to accompany them. This was natural as the goblins were Enri's subordinates. It was true that if Enri ordered it, they would bring other villagers to the great forest. They had done this before with the woodcutters. However, there was the perfect villager who the goblins would protect at all costs. It was not that they were making her a scapegoat. Should there be danger, they believed that the goblins would protect Enri with their lives. When Enri was thinking about what to do, she heard a cute coo sound. That sound stopped her train of thought. When she looked, she saw Nemu's unhappy gaze directed towards her. "Oh-chan, I'm hungry. Can we eat yet?" Sorry. Then, wash your hands after we pack up. I'll go get things ready." "K." Nemu's response was full of energy. After taking apart the millstone, she scraped the accumulated green paste into a small urn. Enri returned to the house, wondering what she should make for lunch. What she had was the black bread that was a few days old. The usual lunch was a soup that had some dried meats in it, but with the goblins, their food situation would change drastically. Thus she decided to make a soup with fresh vegetables and meat. Tasting it in her mind, her cheeks slackened as she opened the house door. Overlord First Half Chapter 81, Gaiden, Dear Best Enri-san Part 2. When one enters the outskirts of the great forest of Tobe, it is not dark nor with bad footing. This was as the villagers had cut down trees when necessary. Thus the forest outskirts atmosphere was a friendly one to humans. One could even have a picnic here. However, when one goes herb picking, they have to head deeper inside. If one proceeded past the 150-meter mark, the surroundings would change instantly. The footing was bad, and the canopy of trees above one's head blocks sunlight even at high noon, causing darkness to fall. One's vision is blocked by the trees, making it extremely difficult to see far. One would be lucky to see even 15 meters ahead. The term primordial forest suited this terrain perfectly. From here on out, the chance of encountering a monster rose dramatically. Basically, the danger rating shot up. Enri stood in front of this forest. Naturally, she was not alone. Surrounding her were all the members of her loyal goblin troop. The goblins were equipped with a chain shirt and a round shield, thick machetes hung from their waists. Below their chain shirts were brown shorts. They also had shoes made of pelts. Pouches hung at their waists. They were not missing a single piece of equipment. The fully equipped goblins were doing their final checks of the luggage that they were carrying on their backs. It was mostly water skins and machete sharpeners. In addition, rain gear in case of wet weather. The reason for them being fully equipped but carrying little on their backs was cater for possibility of fighting. Plus, there were no plans to stay for too long in the forest. While the goblins were doing their checks, the largest goblin walked up to Enri. It was not an overstatement to say that he was a warrior. He had a large muscular body that made one wonder if he was just a goblin. He wore a practical plain breastplate and was carrying a well-used greatsword on his back. He was the goblin leader, the head of the goblins. Then, Enri-san. As I said earlier, we will be scouting out the surrounding forest. Will you be fine? The goblin leader's rough face frowned in worry as he stared at Enri. In response, she smiled. I'm fine. We are not going that deep, and they will be protecting me. Then it's fine. The goblin leader glared at the three goblins that Enri was looking at. He then raised his voice. Oi, you guys, you know this, but don't you dare let Enri-san get even a single wound. Yes. The three goblins simultaneously replied with gusto. Somewhat satisfied, the goblin leader nodded his head several times. However, honestly, doing such a dangerous thing. The goblin leader once again turned to Enri and made a grim face. They have had this conversation multiple times since leaving the village and Enri was getting tired of hearing it over and over, but she could not say anything because he was doing it out of worry for her. However, if we cannot collect herbs we cannot earn money. Can we not do it with the pelts of beasts? If it is that, then even we can help out. It's not bad, but herb gathering is still the most profitable. The quantity of money that one could earn with herbs and the pelts of beasts were completely different. It was like the difference between heaven and earth. It was true that if it were a rare beast then its pelt would earn quite a bit, but such an occasion was rare. There really is nothing that Enri-san should worry about, you know? We are all fine, really. We are not faced with any trouble right now. But if something happens then it is too late. Isn't the strengthening of your weapons important? That is, certainly. It's true. However, you just won't stop, huh? Even with the knowledge that it was unlikely for Enri to turn back, the goblin leader tried again and again to convince her otherwise on their way to the forest. There was a reason why Enri wanted money. To explain it simply, Enri was trying to earn money to equip the goblins with better equipment. Thus they were having their precious master be exposed to danger for their sakes. The goblin leader thought that it should be the other way around. No, this was what all the goblins thought. However, it was naturally so, that they should support Enri when she wanted to prepare better weapons for them. Not giving something to the person that they would offer their lives to, would be their greatest shame as her protectors. Of course, since the goblins were protecting the village, they could always tax the villagers. However, Enri did not want to do that. Thus she had to earn the money for the weapons the goblins wanted herself. And the most efficient method to achieve that was to collect herbs. It would be fine for Enri-san to join us once we have confirmed the forest's safety. The goblin mage spoke up from behind her. It was the spellcaster goblin with a humanoid skull on her head. In her hand she held a shabby, twisted wooden which length exceeded even her height. Her body was draped in some tribe's strange designs, and her chest was larger than the other goblins. If one looked closely, they would see that her face did have some cuteness to it. It was to the point that one would wonder why the males and females had this much of a difference. However, you cannot confirm it, is that right? Yup, yes. Unfortunately, no one knows. We should at least check for whether the forest is calm or not, but that will take time. But by then the season for those herbs would end. This would cause the time until the equipment upgrade to be extended. It will be fine. We will not be going in that deep. The goblin leader understood that he could no longer convince Enri and looked at the three goblins protecting her. He repeated the same things that he had earlier said. We cannot protect her. That is why you pussies will need to represent us, and protect Enri-san with your lives. Yes. If we work together, that will be the safest though. But then we will be one step behind. Yes. There is a need to discover if anyone has gotten close to the edge of the forest. So we have to hurry. This was their hypothesis based on the information that the writer brought back, the existence of monsters near the edge of the forest. For now, the first step would be to confirm whether they really were there or not. Should monsters come near the edge of the forest, they may appear near the village. The village had walls, but there were monsters that could climb over the wall. Even herbivores, they could attack the fields. Thus a regular patrol for the forest was necessary. Tonight would be the first patrol. The first time for something would always have the highest risk. That was why they could only spare 3 goblins to protect Enri. That is why even if we do not head for the depths of the forest it is still dangerous, Enri-san. Enri nodded. However, the herbs gathered at this period will earn the most money. In addition, the season will not last for long. It would have been best for everyone to work together to protect Enri-san and search. But we need to make the patrol tonight. The watchtowers are completed, so it should be fine if we pay attention. We also have the stone golems. I apologize for making you rack your brains for me, but please patrol the forest. Enri firmly rejected their suggestion, causing the goblin leader to understand that any more than this would be rude. Dividing one's soldiers is a foolish act, but, understood. Please be really cautious though. Don't give your sister a reason to cry. After saying that, the goblin leader ordered everyone to leave. Afterwards, Enri and the 3 goblins entered the forest. The depths of the forest. The temperature dropped after 150 meters from the edge of the forest. This was as sunlight could not reach there. However, it was not completely dark and even Enri could continue on without problems. Enri's group of 4 proceeded into the forest, moving through the damp atmosphere. The forest was quiet, almost completely silent with the exception of the occasional cries of birds. If anything apart from that could be heard, it was the sound of shaking branches. Amidst that silence, one could hear the footsteps of Enri's group. Their formation was that of an isosceles triangle with Enri taking the center. It would be difficult to maintain such a wide formation in the forest, and thus they were supposed to move in a straight line, but to protect Enri, they forcefully held this formation, sacrificing their speed as a result. After about 200 meters in, Enri looked at their surroundings. She was looking for a place that the herbs would grow. It was fortunate that she was able to immediately find some. The herbs were growing in between the gaps of the trees. Without the proper knowledge, finding the area where certain plants grew was extremely difficult. In addition, she was neither proficient in searching skills nor had received training for it. She could do no better than the villager who has lived near the edge of the great forest for most of their lives. A goblin went ahead scouting the area, and then silently beckoned Enri forward. Enri and the 2 goblins kept their bodies low and ran towards the place where herbs grew. In her eyes, the large quantity of herbs appeared as a mountain of coins. Enri frantically suppressed the greed that was growing in her. The location was dangerous, and there was a need for her to work quickly. She could not afford to be lost in her desire. Enri sat down and began to pluck herbs from their roots. Should she pluck it haphazardly, its medicinal effect would weaken. It is especially so for this herb since this plant's medicinal effects were concentrated in the root. She should pluck it as close to the roots as possible. Once she got used to the smell hitting her nostrils, she felt no reason to stop. The herbs were carefully placed one by one into the bag hanging at her waist. As time slowly passed, her bag grew heavier and heavier. If she asked the goblins to help, then work would proceed faster, but they were keeping watch on the surroundings. Enri was not that foolish to ask them for help. They silently plucked herbs for quite a while. Suddenly the goblins sunk to the ground, sitting around Enri. They made a gesture to the surprised Enri. It was an emergency situation. For the first time, Enri stopped working and listened intently. She could slightly hear something large approaching. Something is heading here. We should move away. Enri and the goblins stood up and hid behind the nearby trees as if running away from the sound. The trees were not large so they could not hide themselves completely, but one should not be able to see them from afar. The 4 of them made themselves smaller, held their breaths and prayed that what was making the sound would head off in another direction. However, luck was not on their side. Its height was around 2 to 3 meters. The protruding jaw made it look like an idiot. It had arms thick as tree trunks, and a hunched back that almost reached the ground. A branch that was torn off a tree and a very rough pelt hang from its waist. They could smell the stench wafting off of it from all the way over. Its brown skin had warts growing on it, and it had a thick chest and protruding stomach. From its appearance, one can understand that it probably had quite a bit of strength. It was a giant monster that looked like a naked chimpanzee. It was known as an ogre. Its nose twitched and it looked around. It seemed like it had not noticed Enri's group hiding behind the trees. The goblins were quietly discussing if they should attack first. That ogre's eyes focused on one spot. It was the herb-gathering area. It had noticed Enri, whose hands were stained with herb juices. Yes, it was the stench that Nemu had when she was crushing herbs. Enri and the goblins were used to it and did not notice, but there was a huge stench coming from where Enri was. As if feeling Enri's panic, the ogre's eyes moved and captured Enri and the goblins in its sights. Looks delicious. It was looking at Enri. Feeling the gaze of a hungry beast, Enri felt her body shiver. Should she be alone upon encountering it, her fate would be decided there and here. However, in this situation, that was impossible. "Oi oi, what are you saying, bastard?" One goblin stood in front of Enri. Of course, he could not cover Enri with the height difference, but it caused the ogre to cast an annoyed gaze at the small thing between it and Enri. "Small one, eat." "Shut up." The goblin's response to the ogre's roar was exceedingly simple. He stuck his thumb up from his fist and pointed behind him. That action fully expressed the goblin's intent. Eat. I said. Shut up." With extremely practiced movements, the goblin drew the machete hanging from his waist. A beat later, so did the other goblins. "Goo. Ha, come at me, sexy boy." The ogre growled and glared at the goblins. The shining edge of the three machetes caused some of the ogre's reasoning to return. However, the difference in size between ogres and goblins was overwhelming, akin to a grown-up man facing children. The ogre felt that and was about to take a step forward. The goblin shook his machete. The ogre stopped. The flicker of the machete caused the ogre to feel cautious. However, while the ogre did hesitate out of caution, seeing the length of the sword, it felt that it was useless. If it were a foolish ogre, it would immediately attack. "That guy will hold him here. We will go." The goblin was whispering to avoid drawing the ogre's attention. Enri was surprised by what he said, causing her to look at the two goblins. She thought that if there were three of them, even an ogre would fall. However, the two goblins had the expression of warriors and made cold decisions. "Protecting Enri no Onsan is what we should sow. Onsan. You cannot get this wrong. Onsan staying alive will be our victory. For that, any number of our lives can be used. Also, the situation may get worse." It was unclear if he could defeat the ogre. They would be about equal in strength. So attacking with the three of them was not a bad decision. However, should a third party appear, it would be an even more dangerous situation. If there were a group of ogres, leaving would be the best option. It was natural to get the person that they were protecting out of danger faster. While Enri could understand their reasoning, she was still reluctant to accept the proposal. But the goblin made a manly smile and said, "Enri no Onsan. Believe in us. Do you think that he will lose?" The goblin drew his sword and glared at the ogre. Without turning around, he pointed over his shoulder. His intentions were clearly expressed to Enri. "Take care." Enri just said that and let herself be pulled away by the goblin. Leaving the forest, the two goblins left Enri's protection to the riders stationed outside and disappeared back into the forest. Enri watched over them as if praying for them. She was exposing them to danger. She wanted them to come back alive, unharmed if possible. That was her wish. The Soul Rider then surprisingly spoke to Enri in a light-hearted tone. "Are you that worried? If that is the case, then can Enri no Onsan be our shield?" As their superior, she knew that the goblins had no wish for her to do such a thing, causing her to look down. The reason for this was as she felt that she simply could not do that. The image that the rider was creating was too difficult for a simple village girl to live up to. The one who spoke to her in this state was the same rider. She felt panicked, owing to the criticizing gaze he was giving her. "Oh, it's not like I want Enri no Onsan to do that, you know? I prefer for Enri no Onsan to have a calm and quiet air about you, and I think that everyone else prefers that as well. Even if you suddenly act like a ruler, we will be troubled." Another rider nodded. The first one scratched his head, thought about his next words and opened his mouth. "I'm not used to comforting people. I have no confidence in what I'm saying, but why is Enri no Onsan this worried? The goblins are over there for my sake, so is it not natural to worry? That's the part I don't get." The reason why Enri-san to head into the forest to collect herbs despite the danger is because you want us to improve our weapons. Then is it not our duty to protect Enri-san with our lives? The reason why Enri-san is exposing yourself to danger is because of us. But to stop Enri, who was about to continue arguing, the goblin made a stop sign with his hands. To earn a large amount of money, it is normal to be exposed to some danger. Even if the result is death, we will still accept it. Enri could not even reply. If one thought about it in a certain way, such reasoning was natural. Well, these are our thoughts as warriors, and we know that it is greatly different from Ansan. A warrior and a village girl. Should these two people share the same thought patterns, it would be scary in a certain way. It is because you are such a kind Ansan that worries about us that we feel that we have to protect you at all costs. Enri blushed at the goblin's words. Goblins were quite ugly in the terms of the human sense of beauty, but the rider had the air of a strong warrior about him. Being praised by someone like that, it could not be helped that a simple village girl like Enri would blush. And we are not that weak to lose to an ogre. Still riding the wolf, the goblins smiled and pointed at the forest. Enri looked at that direction and saw 3 goblins. Right, we are Enri-san's bodyguards. If we cannot get through even this, we have no right to call ourselves that. All the goblins heading back had no anomalies in their footsteps. This meant that they were completed unharmed. Enri waved her hand in joy. As if responding, the center goblin, the one left behind, waved his hand. The distance between them shortened and both sides let out cries of joy. The happiest one was, of course, Enri. Are you okay? Yeah, Ansan. We somehow got through it. Great. There was not a wound on any part of their body. There were black stains near their sleeves, but that was probably ogre blood. The rider calmly examined their figure and asked. So did you kill the ogre? Goblins used short weapons. If they inflicted a fatal wound, there would be a lot of blood, and they would likely be stained with it. However, the goblins' clothes were too clean. No, we didn't. Why? The rider's face changed into one of astonishment, but the goblin answered immediately. It escaped. If it were in a group, it would be better for it to lead us to its comrades. True. We should get them all at once. Then let's guard Enri-san till the village, and wait for leader's return. Is that fine, Ansan? With the conversation changing suddenly, Enri was confused for a moment, but this was something the goblins decided and thus was a better course of action than anything she could think of. All right, then, after today's patrol is over we'll be subjugating ogres. Late at night. Something woke Enri up from her deep sleep. Opening her eyes, nothing in her surroundings seems to have changed, but she looked around nonetheless, taking inventory. Spread out before her was a mostly dark world. The only source of light was from the moonlight filtering in from the crack in the window. She could not see anything wrong with the scene that was illuminated by the dim moonlight. However, since she was not completely awake, the only thing keeping her from falling asleep again was a certain sound. She felt that her sister next to her was sleeping well, but she also heard a rhythmical thumping. She wondered what it was and immediately understood. Someone was knocking lightly at the door. Enri raised an eyebrow, moved the thin sheet covering her and her sister's body, and slowly got up. Wondering what was going on at such a late hour, she moved silently to prevent her sister from waking up. Wondering if the squeaks of the floor would wake Nemu up, her heartbeat quickened. Ever since that incident, Nemu would always sleep with Enri. The incident had left a huge wound in her heart. That was why she slept with Enri. Enri had no intention to remonstrate her. She too found comfort in sleeping together with her sister. Enri knew that even if they slept together, should her sister have a nightmare, she would fling herself into Enri. That was why if she was sleeping soundly, Enri wanted her to stay that way. The entire time it took for Enri to walk to her front door, the knocking did not stop. Looking outside through the peephole, she saw the figure of the goblin leader. Enri felt her unease turn into relief. Sighing, Enri spoke to the ones outside. Of course, it was in a quiet manner so as to not wake up her sister. Goblin leader-san, are you okay? Ah, Enri-san. We made it through. Oh, sorry for waking you. Enri opened the door slightly and slipped out from the small crack. This was to prevent excessive moonlight from shining into the room and waking Nemu up. There is something I need you for. Now? Yes, really sorry. Those were words that would make one frown, considering that it was late at night. The eyes of humans were not suited for nighttime. However, there were many monsters with night vision. Thus night belonged to beings that were not human. At such an hour, the goblin leader felt that there was a reason that he had to wake her up. This had to be done now. She believed that there was a reason for that. Enri gave it a bit of thought, and immediately understood. It was regarding the ogre's subjugation. They had met up with the goblin leader and explained the situation. He had then decided to have all the goblins search for the ogre's tracks. The goblin leader found multiple ogres. If the ogre that attacked Enri's group was amongst them, then great, but if not, there may then be quite a number of ogre hordes. They had departed before nightfall, so they had probably just returned. So it was reasonable for them to call for her immediately. Thus this was extremely important. However, apart from that, Enri knew nothing else. Got it. Where should I go? Can you lead me? She was guided to the gate. Enri walked through the quiet village, illuminated by the moonlight. On the other side of the door was a sight that caused Enri to stand rooted to the spot. There were 5 ogres lying prostrate. Surrounding them were all the members of the goblin troop. The joy of seeing all of them unharmed was pushed aside by the surprise of the ogres. "Hey! What is this?" she asked the goblin leader next to her in a panic. "Well, when we attacked the group of ogres, there were 7. When we killed 2 they stood down. So we wanted Enri-san to decide what to do with them." "Hey! Oi, you guys! Our Enri-san is here. Your fates will be decided by her words." Reacting to those words, the gaze of the 5 ogres instantly became heavier. This surprised Enri and he had to stop herself from taking a step back. Panic lasted for only an instant, but it felt like an eternity for Enri. The ogres then spoke, interrupting her thoughts. "Scary, small master. We sorry. The one attacked you, dead. They bad so died. Symbol of apologize, have. Present give. So forgive us." It was an apology of not just words, but also with gestures. To Enri, it seemed that they were like children that were just scolded. However, hearing the last part, Enri quizzically tilted her head. One of the ogres in front of Enri thrust out a wild beast that was hidden behind their giant bodies. "This delicious. This give. Forgive us. Difficult to get. You eat. We sorry." With that, a beast was placed in front of Enri with a thud. The waft of fresh blood hit her in an instant. Basically, the ogres gave her this beast as an apology and wanted to be forgiven. So what do we do?" "Hey! What do you mean?" Enri asked the goblin leader. What was she to do? Enri finally understood why she was brought here. She had to decide how to deal with the ogres. Let them live, or die. Enri thought. Stealing the lives of others was a natural part of being alive. However, she could not let the human-attacking ogres go so easily. They might attack another villager. Then the problem might be solved if she ordered them to go far away. But that may only be postponing the problem. They might return and attack those entering the forest. It is a predictable outcome, and furthermore the possibility of it happening was not low. Then the safest thing to do would be to kill them. The goblin leader gave Enri some advice. Enri no Enri-san. It is said that ogres are man-eaters, but they are nothing more than carnivorous monsters. It is just easier to capture humans rather than wild beasts, so they choose to attack humans. It was true that it was much easier to capture humans rather than wild beasts. One could understand this just by looking at the difference in agility between humans and beasts. Also, there was no way a simple villager could defeat an ogre. Then it was completely natural for ogres, rather, all living creatures to hunt weak and easy prey. Well, so, if we prepare food for them, they will not attack the human villagers. They attack humans for food after all. In addition, we are much better at hunting than ogres. The ogres will rarely be hungry. She knew that the goblin archer was extremely skilled at hunting animals. He was much better than the village hunter that was killed by the knights. Thus the villagers could often eat fresh meat. In addition, Enri heard from the goblin archer that he was still not at his limit. He could probably easily get 5 ogres worth of food. Enri sent a questioning gaze at the goblin archer. He immediately opened his mouth to respond. "I can easily get food for the ogres. Leave it to me." An affirmative answer was given to her thoughts. Enri nodded and expressed her thanks. "But, what will do after we feed them?" This is codependency. We cannot be borrowing the golems forever. So it would be best to have some people with strength. In exchange for food, I was thinking that they could be used as labor. Will the villagers accept them? Well, That I don't know. But, we can have them live near the village and work for us." The goblin leader grinned. Recalling the hungry eyes of the ogre, Enri did not want to agree. However, if the goblin felt as warriors that was best, then it was better than what Enri would think of. Despite knowing that, Enri voiced her unavoidable worry. "Will it be fine?" "It will be fine." The goblin leader's confident reply struck down her unease. "We have disciplined them. They have no intention of rebelling against us. They can even get food. No matter how stupid they are, they will not make any suspicious movements." Enri then understood. If one thought about it calmly, the goblin leader's words made perfect sense. As said earlier, ogres attacked humans for food. If food was prepared for them, there would be no reason to attack humans. In addition, it would be unusual for them to willingly face those stronger than them. Got it. There is no need to take the ogres' lives. Understood. Then we shall let them live. I will return this animal, so please give it to the ogres. Really? I don't mind. Enri lowered her voice and whispered the goblin leader. Is that bad? No, not at all. Then please do. The goblin leader nodded and faced the ogres. He then shouted in a loud voice. Great. Enri-san will spare your lives. The tensed-up ogres relaxed. There was the chance that they would be killed. This was the natural reaction. One of the ogres looked firmly at Enri and spoke. Small ones strong. You ruler of strong ones, stronger. We. Captured by small ones. You, chief of chief. One of the ogres ignored Enri's surprise and bowed to her. Following him, the others also lowered their heads. We will work for you. Say, isn't Enri-san like a sister to you? No, we don't call her Enri-san anymore. From now on it's Enri-san. Enri-san. Sounds good. Do you all swear loyalty to Enri-san? Understood. We obey the strong. Ansan, we obey. Ansan. We obey. Great. This means that we have new members for Enri's bodyguard unit. Oh, isn't it great? As expected of Enri-san. If we can continue at this rate, it will become really amazing. Enri blinked her eyes in surprise, following which. Her voice, somewhat between a scream and a cry of astonishment, resonated through the darkness of the night. Overlord First Half Chapter 82, Gaiden, Dear Best Enri-san Part 3. The fortress city Rental had 3 layers of walls, fitting for its name. The gate attached to the outermost wall was the most gigantic, and anyone who stood in front of it would be filled with severe apprehension. It was not rare to see travelers with their mouths open in shock in front of the gate. It was known as the gate that could repel even the Empire. At the side of the gate was a holding station where several guards stood in the shade, boredom showing on their faces. For a city that may be at the front lines, the guards seemed to be considerably lax, but those stationed at the station were only checking people. Since their job was to check for the smuggling of illegal goods or spies, if there was no one entering, they had no work to do. It was true that the guards working here had a special sense and could be called elites amongst the guards. It was questionable letting such elite guards waste their time here. However, documentation is an important job, one that the regular guards could not do. Having them here would be an even greater waste. And if there was no one entering the city, it was natural that they had nothing to do. There was the question of the security of the surrounding areas, but that is handled by sentries at the top of the wall. This was to allow the inspecting guards to focus on their jobs. Thus general guards liked them with no work to do. While they could not play card games, they did not try to hide their whistling. Of course, they were free now, but when it got busy, it got very busy. Especially in early mornings when the gate opened, they were so busy that they destroyed several writing brushes. Around the time that the sun was almost at its zenith and it was getting hotter, one of the guards placed his elbows on the desk, stared out the window in a bored manner, and thus noticed a carriage heading towards Rental with a rhythmical clip-clop. There was one girl at the rider's seat. The carriage had no covering, but no other figures could be seen inside. The woman was wearing no armaments. Thus the logical answer was, which village is she from? As the guard thought this, he cocked his head to the side. It was not rare for humans from nearby villagers to visit. However, it was different when that person was a sole female. Even the surroundings of Rental had bandits and monsters. So no one could come alone. Holding on to this question in his head, he looked at the horse. And then he was confused all over again. The horse was a fine one. There was no way a simple village girl could have one. Its grooming and physique made one think that it was a warhorse. Even if one could find a warhorse, it would be extremely expensive. And any normal person who tried to buy one would find it impossible. Excluding special cavalry units like wyverns and griffins, this was the pinnacle of mounts and was extremely difficult to get. Someone who could own such a carriage would at least be someone who had connections. One might think of stealing it, but retributions would definitely occur if something of that magnitude was stolen. It was to the point that even bandits would refrain from touching someone riding a warhorse. There was no way that a village girl could own a warhorse with that much value. Thus she simply had the appearance of a village girl, her true stature being completely different. A hint at this was that she was traveling alone. It shows that she has confidence in her own strength, and had no need to depend greatly on equipments. One profession fit the bill. Magic casters. That was a logical possibility. Magic casters were a very coveted profession. As adventurers they would have connections and money, and could probably get warhorses. Is she some kind of magic caster? His colleague next to him came to the same conclusion and voiced it. Maybe. The guard raised an eyebrow and replied. To spellcasters, magic was their weapon, and they could be more dangerous than a fully equipped warrior. And they were difficult to investigate. Firstly, although magic is a weapon, they cannot check for it. As such, one can never be sure exactly how dangerous they are. Secondly, it is extremely difficult to discover their possessions if they hide it with magic. Thirdly is that there are many specialty magic items that will cause a lot of troublesome paperwork. Honestly, they are the most painful people to inspect and check for goods. Thus they work together with personnel from the Magician's Guild. But do we have to call him? I don't want to. It can't be helped. If a problem occurs after we label her as a non-magic caster, it will be dangerous. It would be nice if magic casters dressed up as such. Such as holding a mysterious staff and wearing a mysterious robe? Yup. That would definitely be a magic caster. Both of them laughed as the sitting guard stood up. They had to get ready to welcome the girl who may be a magic caster. As the guards watched, the carriage approached the gate and stopped. The girl got off from the rider's seat. Sweat trickled down her face, making it obvious that she had traveled beneath the sun's rays. She wore long sleeves and long pants, probably to avoid a tan. They were not of good quality. She seemed to be a simple village girl. But there was the possibility that she has another identity or is trying to hide something. The guard walked towards the girl without hesitation. Firstly, there are various things I would like to ask. Could we do it over there? Yes. I do not mind. The guards brought the girl to the station. On guard from metal magic like charm, another guard followed the two from several meters away. The other guards were watching the girl, making sure she was not making any suspicious moves. As if feeling the strong sense of caution, the girl tilted her head. Is something wrong? Eh? Nothing at all. Being able to feel this strange atmosphere meant that she was not a nobody. While thinking that, the guard entered the station. The station was not in direct sunlight and was much cooler than the outside. Feeling the cool but not chilly air, the girl let out a sigh. Then please take a seat. Yes. The girl sat on one of the chairs in the room. First, let's hear your name and where you came from. Yes. Enri. I have come from Carney village that is near the Forest of Tom. The guards exchanged looks and one walked out of the room. He was going to check if she was in the register. In the kingdom, there was a register that was used to manage the citizens. In short, it was a mess. Information regarding the life or death of a person often arrived late or was overlooked. It was thus a common occurrence for a dead person to be thought alive. And if they were from a distant city, the information was even later, and even more overlooked. They were managing the population of the kingdom with that register, but there were several tens of thousands of individuals. Thus it would be bad if they relied on it too much, but it did help to a certain extent. Even though the register was not awfully reliable, it had quite the volume. Thus it took some time to flip through it. The guard knew that well and decided to move on to something else first. For now, please pay the admission fee into the city. It's 2 coppers for a human and 4 for a horse. Yes. The girl took out a dirty-looking pouch bag from her waist and loosened the mouth. She took out 6 coins. She then passed the shimmering coins to the guard. Confirming the coins placed upon his leather gloves, the guard nodded and placed the coins next to him. It is the proper amount. Next is the reason for why you came to E-Rental. Yes. I have come to sell herbs. The guard looked outside at the carriage. Some of the guards were in the midst of moving pots. Could you please tell me the name of the herb and the number of pots? Yes. 4 pots of new curry, and 6 pots of Enri-san. 6 pots of Enri-san? Yes. Pride was written all over her face. Seeing that, the guard nodded in understanding. Since he was posted to this station, it was natural for the guard to have some knowledge of herbs. He naturally knew of the Enri-san that Enri mentioned. Enri-san was a herb that could only be collected for a short period of time, and was necessary for all healing potions. Thus it had an extremely high price. Having 6 pots, considering the volume of those pots, could easily fetch 100 gold pieces. So, where do you plan to go? There is someone I always sell to too. Is that so? The guard decided that nothing further was necessary. His job was to prevent dangerous items from entering, and chasing items already inside was out of his job scope. The herbs this time were not the case, but if it were possible ingredients for pleasurable drugs, it would take a lot more questioning to get through. The guard nodded and looked away from Enri. The herbs she mentioned were all for daily use and were not dangerous. There was nothing suspicious about her words. Enri's expression also showed no signs of lying. After checking that there was nothing hidden in the pots and that they really were the herbs she mentioned, their job had finished. The next thing to do was predetermined. At that moment, the other guard came back and shook his head once. This meant that there was a record of the woman named Enri. The guard nodded in response. However, the only thing recorded in the ledger was that a girl called Enri was born in Carney village. There was no proof that the girl in front of him was Enri, and there was nothing about how Enri had lived. She might be someone who was using the name of Enri. Or maybe as a result of being thrust into a world of killing, the person known as Enri might have become someone drenched in blood. That was why a final check was necessary. Understood. Then could you please call in that person? The guard nodded and left the room again. We will be checking your luggage now, is that fine? Eh? Enri frowned in surprise. The guard panically tried to explain himself. It's not like there is a problem. Unfortunately, this is part of the law. It's not anything important, so please calm down. If that is the case, then I understand. Seeing that Enri understood, the guard secretly sighed in relief. It was not wise to anger someone who may be a magic caster. Enri and the guard. As the two stopped speaking, silence fell. When the two could bear this silence no longer and wanted to talk about something, the guard from earlier, as well as another man, entered. He was a magic caster. He had a sharp nose, and sweat beaded down his pale face. His chicken-like fingers clutched a staff. He had a strange triangular hat on his head and a hot black robe draped over his body. The guard personally thought that it would be fine to take it off if it were hot, but the magic caster might have an attachment to it, and he did not try to remove any of it. Thus, immediately after the magic caster entered, the temperature of the room increased a few degrees. Is it that girl? The magic caster's quiet voice made one feel extreme incongruity. He seemed to be in his late 20s, but his extremely hoarse voice made it difficult to tell. Was his appearance misleading, or was his voice that dry? Enri looked between the magic caster and the guard in surprise. The guard felt that it was normal for her to be and nodded to himself. Even the guard was surprised the first time he heard the magic caster's voice. He is a magic caster that has come from the Magician's Guild. He is doing a simple check, so please wait a bit. The guard sent a signal to the magic caster and bowed to him. If you please. Of course. The magic caster took a step forward and faced Enri. He then chanted magic. Detect magic. The magic caster's eyes narrowed. It was as if he were a beast that found its prey. Even though the guard wanted to get into a battle stance, but Enri showed no surprise. The guard saw this and felt that his guess was on the mark. There was no way that a simple village girl could remain calm after being faced with such a gaze. If she did not at least fight monsters, there was no way she could bear this gaze. Basically, this girl called Enri has experienced battles of life and death. From that, the chance that she was a magic caster got higher. You cannot hide it from my eyes. You are secretly carrying a piece of magic equipment. Around your waist. Enri was surprised and looked at her waist. The guard readied himself. The guard knew the range of a weapon like a sword, but nothing about magic weapons. Like how humans fear the unknown, so did the guard. Is it this? What Enri took out from under her clothes was a small horn that could be hidden with her 2 hands. It looked shabby, and if the guard saw it he would think nothing of it. Is this a magic item? Correct. Do not be fooled by its appearance. This has quite the magic power imbued inside. The guard gazed at it in wonder. This magic caster said that this was quite the item. How much power did it possess? The guard, thinking that the shabby appearance was an intentional disguise, felt a chill like he was stabbed. Ah, that is. There is no point. My magic sees through everything. The magic caster interrupted Enri and activated another magic. Appraisal magic item. Silence fell over the room. The magic caster was silent, the guard who was waiting for an answer was silent, and even Enri was silent. It took about 30 seconds. It felt longer than that, but the magic caster finally opened his mouth. Is this a magic item that can summon a horde of goblins? Yes. Enri spoke in surprise. I see. So you intend to use this in the city? I do not. Guard. What is it? This is a magic item that can summon and command goblins. It is unclear how many it can summon, but it is not that dangerous of an item. But should there suddenly be goblins rampaging through the city, this person should be taken in for questioning. Is that so? Anyway, she does not have anything that would be immediately dangerous, and does not seem to be smuggling in anything. I believe that there are no problems. The magic caster had far more knowledge about magic items. If such a person said it was fine, there was no need to raise an opposing opinion, and accepting it would be the best. Understood. Thank you for your cooperation, Enri-san. This is it. However, the guard asked the magic caster who was about to say something. What is it? No, it's fine. It's nothing important. The rest is your job. Is that so? The guard was not satisfied, but he could think of no reason to keep her any longer. If he looked outside, he would find that the luggage checks have been completed with no problem. Then Enri-san. Welcome to E-Rental. As Enri passed through the gate and looked at the city, the guard asked the magic caster. Was it an amazing item? Its evaluation depends on the number of goblins. But it is nothing weak. A girl who had a carriage and owned what might be an amazing magic item. The guard felt that his interest piqued and asked the magic caster. What exactly is she? The magic caster took out a handkerchief from under his robes and wiped the sweat on his face. As the handkerchief darkened from the sweat, the magic caster finally spoke. 2 options. Huh? As if he were a teacher explaining something to a dumb student, the magic caster continued. Since she came here alone, this is the first option. She has confidence in her own strength, well, as a magic caster. Thus the lack of companions. That is one possibility. And the second. She is traveling alone because she has a magic item. If it is the former, it is simple. We can understand if she is a simple magic caster. Isn't she too young? The guard had heard that since magic casters had to learn many things, it often took years for them to master the basics. Thus Enri was too young to be a magic caster. I do not think she is that powerful, but remember this. In the case of a magic caster, it is possible for their appearance and age to not match. For example, a powerful magic caster, the head magic caster of the Empire. The strongest magic caster of humanity is over 200 years old, but he looks like he's in his 40s. Basically she is. Do not panic. In response to the agitated guard, the magic caster shook his head in annoyance. I said it earlier. I do not think she is that strong. It is not the case that young but promising magic casters do not exist. Especially if they have studied in the Empire's institutions. It is often the case that there are many young magic casters in the Empire with magic items. Is that so? The guard decided to engrave this in his memory. It was necessary to consider the possibility of a young person being a magic caster. It is simple if she is just a magic caster. However, in the second case, if she were indeed just a village girl with a magic item, it will be troublesome. Why? I believe it is easier to accept if she is a simple village girl though? And that she traveled alone with the help of the magic item. Listening to the guard's question, the magic caster sighed. Feeling the magic caster's gaze like he was dealing with an idiot, the guard quashed the feeling of rage that boiled up in him. Understanding that, to him, he probably was an idiot, and that his personality was like this in the first place. On the contrary, if she is a village girl, there is someone behind her who can easily give her such a magic item. Isn't that jumping to conclusions? It might be passed down through her family or something. How did she get such an item? That is a one-use item. It would be better to reserve it rather than to walk around with it. True. Considering that, there might be someone supporting her from behind. Then everything made sense. However, if that was the case, were the magic caster's words of it being troublesome referred to the one behind her? If there is someone behind her, that girl is not just anyone. Why? Could a simple village girl borrow a magic item that costs at least several thousand gold coins? Several thousand? A shout of shock left the guard's mouth. The guard of course knew that magic items were expensive. However, the most expensive potions in the station were at most 150 gold. Comparing the two was a foolish endeavor. Adventurers could possibly carry such an item. However, they had to be high-ranked, blessed by fortune and had a patron behind them. Basically, that person does not think much about handing over such an item, or that person wants that girl to be protected. The guard silently looked for Enri's figure in the city. Of course, she was nowhere to be found. Should we follow her? That is something you should not be asking me. You should decide that. However, it would be better not to anger her. I see. Hearing that, the guard looked again at Enri's back. Of course, the conclusion was the same. The guard recalled Enri's face and engraved it in his heart. There would probably be no problem when she leaves, but should she come again, he felt that something would happen. Enri continued on the road as the carriage shook. Erantle was split into 3 sections. The centermost was where the majority of people stayed. The image that one imagined of a town would be best reflected here. She was looking for a certain shop, one that was told to her by the village chief. Her destination. It was the home of the most famous herbalist in Erantle, Lizzie Bearer. It was normal for craftsmen to have a union guild. This was to avoid stealing business, and to regulate the prices for goods and services. However, the number of herbalists is usually too low and thus a guild is impossible. However, Erantle was a fortress city, and the number of herbalists was high. There hence existed something like a herbalist's guild. The reason Enri was going to Lizzie Bearer's house was that she was like the guild master of the small herbalists guild, and managed the flow of potions and herbs. If she had connections with a herbalist, she would not need to go to Lizzie Bearer's house, but unfortunately Carney Village had no such connections. Thus it was basic to sell the herbs at her house. There was a strange smell wafting along this road. The warhorse showed some signs of not liking where it was going, but with Enri at the reins, it plowed onwards. The smell in the air was of medicine and crushed herbs. This was the proof that this area had many herbalists. As Enri looked around, she moved forward. She then stopped the carriage at the largest house in the area. In contrast to the other houses where there were production areas behind the shop houses, this building was a production house next to a production house next to a production house. Here? Enri was a bit uncertain as she stopped the carriage in front and came down from the rider's seat. There were words next to the door, but Enri could not read. Despite her uncertainty, she knocked several times. There was no reply. She knocked again. There was still no reply. If there was no response the next time she tried, she would have to come back another time. Enri thought that and knocked again. She heard a thumping noise from the other side of the door. And with force, the door was opened. Anne? A woman in unkempt work clothes appeared, stained with the juices of herbs. She spoke with an aggressive voice. Her red hair was in a mess and covered half of her face. A pair of muddled eyes could be seen between the gaps. There were large eye bags underneath. Her half-open eyes moved to look at Enri. Her face was good. However, her eyes were very grim, causing her to feel more scary than beautiful. It was as if she were a beast hungry for blood. In addition, her appearance gives an illusion of age. She might have been the same age or a bit older than Enri. That woman spoke. There was no hint of friendliness in her words. It was full of hostility. Who are you? We are currently very busy right now. Come later. Exca. Anne? Did you not hear me? No. Hurry up, I'm tired. Do you want to ask me what time I woke up? This was bad. She did not intend to listen. Enri deduced that and began to wonder where she could kill time. Could you stop it there? A different came from inside. It was a man's. Hearing that, the girl's attitude did a 180. Enri was looking right at her, eyes wide in shock. It was like seeing a girl before and after she put on countless amounts of makeup. Firstly, Her eyes opened. Her dead eyes from earlier began to sparkle with light. Her corpse-like skin began to blush red. Standing before Enri was a girl younger than her. And a beautiful one at that. Ah! Frantically combing her disarrayed hair, the girl looked back. So you were here. Her tone of voice was completely different. It was as if the person from earlier was an illusion. For a moment it looked as if there was a flower blossoming behind her. Yes. I understand that you were tired, but she seems to be a customer. That's true. I went a bit too far. Clumsily placing her hand on her cheek, she smiled at the man. Behind her, Enri was shocked at this change. Please enter. Now, come in. Pulled in by the now extremely friendly girl, Enri entered the house. However, she could not yet enter. Enri frantically tried to resist the girl pulling her. The luggage in the carriage. Luggage? Releasing Enri, the girl looked at the luggage in Enri's carriage. They are pots. Are there herbs in the pots? Yes. Then it's fine. Even if you bring it, we do not have anyone who can buy it from you. You should know some merchants, right? The problem was not solved at all. Enri thought that, but she had no intention of resisting the force pulling her in, and she entered the house. The room was dim and Enri's eyes could not make anything out until they adjusted. Blinking several times, she made out a room that did not feel like a store. The room itself was not large. At best it was a reception room to talk with customers. There were 2 long benches in the center facing each other, and shelves full of parchment lined the walls. A potted plant was placed in the corner of the room. Inside the room, there was a man. He was a normal man that had no special attractive features. Since there was no other man inside, the reason for her change was definitely him. Even though he was inside, he wore rough gauntlets. Enri felt that she had seen those somewhere, but she had little knowledge about such things. Faye. I'll bring in the luggage. Is that fine? I don't mind. It will help Lizzie. Then please do. He nodded at the smiling girl. Faye slipped past the 2 of them and left the room. Faye's sparkling eyes seemed to chase his figure. Enri felt a strangeness from the man's tone. It was as if his age or gender did not match. However, she had no reason to act against the man. In addition, should that be his original voice or should he mind it, it would be extremely bad. Since Enri came to sell items, she should not place herself in an unfavorable position. Enri thought that and began to start the business negotiations. NN? What? Faye asked without looking away from the man's back. I came to sell herbs, but... Herbs. Yes. For the first time, Faye looked at Enri and began thinking. The reason why her gaze moved probably had something to do with the man that left. Herbs. This may be difficult. Enri frowned. She wondered if there was a large purchase from somewhere, causing them to have a large stock of herbs. Actually. Isn't it fine? One wondered when did he return. He carried a pot easily with his 2 hands as he spoke. Why don't you buy it? We will use this much. Saying that, he placed a pot down and left again. Faye looked inside for an instant and nodded. True. Yup, yes. We can't reach that place. Yup, who are you? I am Enri of Carney Village. Ah, someone from Carney Village. Faye smiled and pointed at a long bench in the middle of the room. The 2 of them sat down facing each other. How many you brought? 4 pots of new curry, 4 pots of hyena and 6 pots of arirish. 6 pots of arirish. Faye raised her voice in surprise. That's amazing. Good job. Since you're from Carney Village, the quality is there. Are all the pots of that size? Faye pointed to the pot that the man had brought. There were already 6 there. Yes. That is true. Then. You are someone from Carney Village. How about 126 gold and 7 silver pieces? Please do. This was an amount of money Enri had never even heard of. Well, if she excluded the amount offered by Ainz the great magic caster. Then that's fine. Yes. By the way, is that person your lover? Enri felt her curiosity well up after feeling the relief of completing a deal. She asked Faye a question, causing Faye to be at a loss for words, wonder who she was talking about, and then blush. Hey. You saw it that way? Hey. Even if you tell me this, I won't give you any more. Hey. Rather than flattery, it was more of a question. However, she did not say this. Even she knew how to read the atmosphere. No, There would be no human that was able to do such a thing in front of the self-absorbed Faye. Enri was secretly relieved that she did not have to ask if she was an employee. Faye's face moved close to Enri's as she lowered her voice. "We have not gone that far. But I'm going for it." "Is that so?" "Well, his face is not that good. But he's very strong. I was saved." Hey. "Is that so?" Enri had an interest in the love stories of other girls. However, even she pulled away after seeing Faye's drooling face. In addition, even though her expression had changed considerably after they first met, the circles beneath her eyes were still present. Now she looked like a mentally ill. "We are doing business now, sorry about that." "Eh? Yes." Suddenly spoken to, a strange cry came from Faye. The man and Enri both widened their eyes. However, he ignored this and continued talking. I carried in all the pots." Thank you very much." Faye flushed with shame as she replied. "I don't mind what you said earlier, Faye. You are really strong. I really admire you." Really?" Hearing Faye's words, the man glanced at his hands covered by gauntlets. He then shrugged. "Well now. Lazy is working non-stop, and the two should take a break now, right? Thanks for worrying. Once this deal if over I'll tell Obach-han. If we are buying the pots, bring them to the herbs section." "Can I ask that of you?" "Well." In contrast to the sparkling eyes and expression of Faye, the man reacted mildly. How should she put it? There seemed to be no hope. Enri struggled to prevent her thought of them being complete opposites from showing on her face. As the man left, Faye's gaze fell back on Enri. "Anyway, can I pay in common gold coins?" I do not mind." Being paid in gold coins would be extremely heavy, but it could not be helped. Since she knew what she was going to do with the money, she thought it would also be fine to be paid in gems, but being paid in coins was basic. "Then I'll go bring it in." Faye said this and stood up. It was not just Enri's imagination that she shot out like a bullet. She flew through the door as if to chase after the man. However, suddenly, the door to the outside was opened. Two women entered. "Hello." It was a languid voice, that was full of arrogance. Enri's gaze fell on the woman who spoke, or rather, a certain part of her. She was thrusting out her chest in front of her. In addition, she wore thin clothes showing her whole body line, causing further attention to be drawn to her chest. She had a curvaceous body. Her brown hair went below her shoulders and was done in a sauvage. Her drooping eyes along with her face gave her a feeling of warmth. She was in her mid-20s, and a smell of perfume wafted off of the woman who did her makeup well. "What do you want, whore?" The freezing cold voice rang in the room. "Ooh, that's mean, Faye-chan. I came to see him." A heart mark was attached to the end of her words. No, Enri was just imagining it. Faye waved her hands as if hitting something in the air. She then set a sharp gaze in her direction. "He is busy with work. Don't be a bother and go home. I'll give you a medicine that works on STDs." That's mean, Faye-chan. While the woman's tone did not change, Enri sensed a strange emotion welling up in her eyes. What? This is... While they had came in together, the woman who had not spoken until now opened her mouth. She was completely different from the other woman. In short, she was a warrior. She was in her 20s, her red hair cut to a length easy to move in. However favorably one looked at it, it was not cut well, it looked like a bird's nest. Her face was not bad, but her eyes were sharp and she wore no makeup. Her skin was tanned a healthy brown. That woman waved at Enri to come over. It would be best not to get involved." Yes." Scurrying towards the female warrior and looking back, she saw that the distance between Faye and the woman had shrunk tremendously. "Is the master inside?" Yes." Enri was confused who she was referring to, but realizing that it was the man, she replied. "Is that so? We're in trouble." "Is that bad?" "This is very bad. The two of them will not end with just slaps." The female warrior looked at Enri and whispered. "They'll beat each other." Please stop them." "No way. The two of them have powerful connections. If it's the two of them, they will stop after they beat each other." As Enri and the female warrior watched in worry, Faye and the woman closed in on each other, and the two's forehead met. "Wanna go at it?" "I don't mind." The instant the two of them formed fists, The bell rang as the man entered. "Darling. Way." With a heart mark, the woman skipped towards the man, and Faye stumbled forward in that moment. Since the woman was jumping and pushing on it with her body at the same time, her ample bosom was smushed considerably. However, his expression had no change. Amazing. Enri had some knowledge of men. The men that Enri knew would not be able to remain calm after receiving such an attack. It was as if he were handling a troubling co-worker. "Well, I like that COOL part of you." She placed her finger on the man's chest and seemed to write something on it. "Why are you—" "Wait, get away from him." With a scream of anger, Faye ran towards the woman. Seeing this, Enri and the female warrior sighed. "What is this?" "This is their daily life." "This seems like a pain." "Yup, very." The two of them sighed again. Overlord First Half Chapter 83, Gaiden, Dear Best Enri-san. Part 4. After 2 days, the wall of Carney village where Enri was born came into sight. Seeing its large and thick shadow made one think that it was a strong iron wall, but Enri could not help but to think that it was inferior to Erantl's. "Yes, we can finally see it." Someone spoke to Enri. It was the goblin riding the carriage. The reason for the goblin who should not be there being there was simple. Enri was not the only one who went to Erantl. She made the trip while being protected by the goblins. Of course, the goblins got off before she entered Erantl. Of course, not all the goblins were present. There were 5 goblins who went along, including the goblin cleric and 1 goblin rider. The reason why not all of them went was because of the ogres who just became Enri's subordinates. Since not much time had passed since, their loyalty was questionable. The village could not be left to them alone. Thus more than half of the goblins stayed behind. That's true. Just a bit more. Even thought they could see the wall of Carney village. This was grassland with a clear line of sight. There was still quite some distance. The carriage continued slowly along the path overgrown with grass. How far had they gone? The goblin's apprehensive voice reached Enri's ears. "Enri-san. Look there." "Eh?" The goblin next to her pointed outwards. Looking there, Enri saw a covered carriage in the corner of her vision. The carriage dashing through the grasslands was pulled by 2 black horses. Enri did not know anything about such a carriage. And protecting it were 4 knights. No, were they knights? There were 4 horses of different colors, red, white, blue and black. Those that rode on top of them hid their faces with hoods, preventing any features from being seen. If one looked at them, they seemed to exude a strange air, but they had a lack of presence. "What is that?" "Have you seen the girl riding it before?" Enri squinted and tried to see who was driving the carriage. However, there was quite some distance, she could not tell at all. "I don't know." "Is that so? We'll hide for a bit." "Ah, yes, please do." Of course, even though they were hiding, there were no hiding spots except inside the carriage. The most they could do was move the stuff the villagers used, like new cloths, and other luggage that had piled up. The rider on his wolf separated from the carriage, stopped running, and crouched down in the grass. As they were doing this, that unfamiliar carriage seemed to have noticed Enri, changed directions and headed for them. Unease welled up in Enri's chest. However, that unease immediately disappeared. The person driving the carriage was a woman. She had recognized that face. "Lupus Regina-san." "Cheese. Enri-san." The woman who was controlling the carriage that came up to them was a maid of Ain's, and a shining beauty at that. Enri greeted Lupus Regina. In contrast to the dirt path that Enri was traveling on, Lupus Regina's carriage was running through the grass. The difference between the two was overwhelming. That difference was due to the difference in the number and quality of the horses. "That is an amazing horse." That certainly may be so. It is an iron horse golem of Ain's-sama's. Iron horse golems. The giant horses covered in full plate barding were the same non-living creatures as the stone golems in Enri's village. Since they had a strong body and armor, such horses could charge straight into the enemy ranks, but they did not have much firepower. Hearing that they were golems, Enri recalled the strength of the stone golems. If one had 2 of such horses, they could easily dash through the grasslands. Even if it would cause the blown-away grass to stick to the carriage wheels. Enri looked between the horse and the covered carriage. By then, the goblin felt that there was no need to hide and returned to Enri's side. "It has been a while, Lupus Regina-san." "Oh. Isn't it Goblin-san, cheese?" "I will ask in place of Enri-no-ne-san." But what happened today? Nei-san. Lupus Regina's gaze fluttered. Ah, I came to deliver stuff Enri-san asked for. Already? Enri was surprised. She then sighed in relief. She felt that it was right to go sell the herbs. I thought faster was better. Also Ian-sama said to give it to you quickly. Enri squinted as if Lupus Regina's smiling face was blinding. She even thought to herself that she should stop making that smile that was as bright as the sun. Ever since Ainz brought the stone golems, most of the villagers treated Lupus Regina as a friend. Thus Enri had some interactions with her. Enri felt that she could be called a friend. Then, will you be going to the village? Yup. Then, are you coming with them? At the end of Enri's gaze, were 4 knights mounting 4 different colored horses a distance away. Ah, I intend to have them wait here. Eh? Are they not Lupus Regina-san's acquaintances? I do not mind if they come with you. No, rather than acquaintances. They are guards. They are my immediate guards created by Ian-sama. They are stronger than me. Enri did not know how strong Lupus Regina was, but she knew that the goblins could not touch her. Thus how strong were the 4 knights on the hill? And how strong was the great magic caster Ainz who could create them? Are they about as strong as the Death Knight? For just an instant, Lupus Regina made a shocked face and then smiled broadly. That's true. They're about there. Is that so? Excluding Ainz, the strongest thing Enri knew was the Death Knight, so it was natural to bring it up. Enri also did not know how strong Lupus Regina was either. But, the earlier thing, we can't do that. If we bring them near the village everyone will be scared. That may be true. While thinking about what would happen, Enri agreed. Due to the fact that the villagers were used to seeing monsters like goblins and ogres, she felt that they would be fine. However, it would be true that they would panic. She did not want to cause pandemonium. They even came from the other side, of the main gate. Then, I want to pass you some things. Can you tell me if there is a place that is spacious but not easily visible? How about inside my house? Ah. Lupus Regina pointed at the covered carriage. Magic weapons and armor will change shape based on the wearer, but normal armor needs some adjustments. There are blacksmiths inside. I don't want them to be seen by the villagers. Is that so? As they were hidden inside the covered carriage, Enri made an audible gulp as she wondered who was inside. Then I think you can use our house. Ah, that's true. Goblin-san's house is quite large. Is that so? Then please lead me there. Of course. Then shall I head there first? Ah, are you flying over there? Please spare me that. I cannot go that fast, and if I fall I will get hurt. Well, that's true. Then we'll head there first, Enri-san. Yes. Understood. Handing over the things the villagers asked for, Enri arrived at the building the goblins were staying in, about 30 minutes after Lupus Regina. Since the ogres were their subordinates, the goblins had enlarged their quarters, thus becoming the largest building in the village. Since they designed it so that the ogres could rampage with no consequences, rather than a house it felt like a rectangular box. As Enri moved closer, the goblins sitting next to the door so large that even an ogre could pass through frantically stood up. Enri no Nei-san. Welcome back. Welcome back. At the loud greeting, Enri silently bowed her head. Enri felt herself blush. It was honestly very embarrassing and she wanted to do something about it, but neither the goblins nor ogres agreed. The goblin leader said that this was necessary for morale, causing Enri to give up. Can I come in? Of course, Nei-san. The goblins leaned in to open the door. Since it was at a size that the ogres could pass through, it was quite heavy. Enri could open it, but it would have required quite a bit of effort. She entered through the open door. The inside was dim. Since the windows were covered, no light could make it in. Goblins and ogres had night vision and thus were not affected by this, but Enri found it difficult to walk. Enri groped around for the small stick. Finding it, Enri chanted the keyword. Shine. A white light cleaved open the darkness. It was a magic item that had continual light cast on it. The ones running towards Enri were caught by the light, saw Enri's face and bowed deeply. Welcome back. Nei-san. Welcome back. Welcome back, On-san. Hearing the goblins and the ogre's voices, Enri bobbed her head and asked. Where did Lupus Regina-san go? Yes, I'll lead you. Guided by the goblin, she walked through the wide room. The goblin's house was split into 3, the center and the wings. One side was the goblins' quarters and the other was the ogres'. She was brought to the center part. Inside there. As she approached it, she felt a stifling heat in the normally cool environment. This is? Yes. This is the heat from the working blacksmith that Lupus Regina-san brought. If she focused she could hear the faint sound of hammering. As Enri put away the magic item, the goblin opened the door. As he did, the intensity of the heat multiplied and slammed into Enri's face. Light shone in. This was the courtyard of the house, and was where the goblins and ogres swung their swords. There was no problem doing so in the village, but that was not a good thing, and it was dangerous if children were around. Thus they did it here. Since it was used for this purpose, most of the goblins and ogres had assembled in the slightest area of the house. "Oi everyone!" Enri-san returned. All at once. Matching the goblin leader's voice. "Welcome back." Countless deep voices mixed together, forming a noise that reached Enri's ears. "Yes, I'm back." When Enri bowed her head, a beautiful voice reached her ears. "Made you wait, Enri no Ne-san." "Please stop that, Lupus Regina-san." "Ah ha ha ha. No, it suits you, Enri no Ne-san." Being said that it suited her, Enri felt ambivalent, but she decided that it was Lupus Regina's joke and puffed up her cheeks in dissatisfaction. Then Enri's dissatisfaction was blown away by the sound of metal clashing. She looked in the direction of the heat source in surprise. Standing there were two flaming creatures wielding hammers. Their bodies were covered in crimson scales, with licks of flame seeping out from the gaps. Their lower halves were that of snakes, and their upper bodies were like lizards. The two of them were hammering a breastplate. The place where they touched it would slowly turn red, and they would hit it while it was in that state. Enri was enamored by the sight as she listened to Lupus Regina's explanation. "They are salamander blacksmiths." They were the blacksmiths that Lupus Regina had mentioned earlier, and Enri looked at the monsters in awe. Anyway, we promised 5 steel breastplates and 5 greatswords for the ogres. 6 high-quality steel machetes for the goblins and 13 high-quality steel chain shirts. All ready. "Thank you very much." Enri bowed her head, and handed the bag with large amounts of gold coins, over 5 kilograms of it, over to Lupus Regina. "I have enough money to pay back the money I received from Ein-sama. I believe I have collected the proper amount, so please check it." "Wow, certainly." Without checking the contents, Lupus Regina swung it over her shoulder. And in response to the Enri's gaze full of emotion, she smiled. "The amount of coin inside. It's fine to not care. As long as you return the money Ein-sama lent you, it's fine." In actuality, if she tried to buy the equipment Lupus Regina had brought, the amount Enri had was not enough. It would not have been remotely possible. Enri could only get such equipment due to Ain's grace. When Enri did her job, Ain's might have been fine with giving her 200 gold coins. However, Ain's was not that generous. He wanted to know if she would get the money herself, or plead with him for it. In that aspect, it was a test. Ein-sama said that as long as you collected 100 gold coins, it would be enough to pass you the equipment. "Enri-san. You have passed Ein-sama's test." Taken back by Lupus Regina's sudden change in tone, Enri somehow nodded. Smiling at the small animal like Enri, Lupus Regina's atmosphere returned to her usual. Then I shall leave this carriage here." Lupus Regina left the courtyard. "Enri no Ne-san." The goblin leader stood in front of Enri with an obedient face. Behind him stood the goblins and ogres. "Thank you very much for working hard for us." "Thank you very much." Words of gratitude were simultaneously thrown at Enri. They then bowed their head together. "You don't have thanked me that much." In a frantic, Enri waved her hands in front of her. But then the goblin leader spoke to her with deep gratitude. "What are you talking about? Having you use the money you risked your life for to equip us? No matter how much we thank you, it will not be enough. Really, this is too much. It is normal to prepare equipment for those who fight." Several of the goblins were about to cry. Enri thought that they did not need to feel that grateful. It was natural to support those who fought to the best of one's abilities. It should be that way as it is thanks to them that the village could be defended. The fact that they were that moved made her want to apologize even more. "We have certainly felt Ne-san's heart. We shall show you better results with these new weapons. We will show you." "Ah. Ha ha ha, yes, I'll look forward to it." Thus, to everyone, I have brought a present. Lupus Regina-san. When did she return? Behind Enri was a brightly smiling Lupus Regina. Next to her was a bare greatsword. The blade shone with a pale white light. It was not reflecting any light, and was in fact radiating it. Enri then heard such swords through stories. Could this be a magic sword? It seems so. It's not particularly strong, but it is a magic sword. In response to Enri's worry, Lupus Regina's response was clear. This conversation proved that their perceptions of the sword's value were completely different. Enri heard that answer and mumbled. We do not have the money to pay for this. Even the lowest level of magic weapons were several times more costly than regular weapons. They are not easily bought. You don't have to mind that. Earlier, quite a bit earlier, we had the chance to collect a lot of magic items. Well, we adjusted its appearance so it's fine. She did not understand Lupus Regina's last few words, but basically it was free. Enri was confused. There was really no reason for her to not accept it free, except that she could not understand Lupus Regina's goal. There were no such things as free lunches after all. However. Thank you very much. Please tell this to Ain-sama. Yes. Understood. However, I don't mean this in a bad way, but are you rejecting it? It was true that Enri thought about refusing at first. However, I heard that there are monsters that can only be defeated with magic weapons. I shall remember this debt and pay it back. Your situational analysis is good. And you know where to be cautious. That is not true. It really is just by chance. Lupus Regina looked seriously at the blushing Enri, and spoke in a voice that no one could hear. As expected of Ain-sama. His evaluation of people is perfect. She is not just a simple girl, I should raise my evaluation of her. Overlord First Half Chapter 84, Gaiden, Dear Best Enri-san Part 5. The E-Randall adventuring party, the Axe of Cyclone, walked silently in a line across the road concealed by the grass. The reason why they were walking in formation despite being in a location in which they had a clear view of their surroundings was probably a bad habit of their occupation. Other such bad habits included walking around in town in full plate armor and being equipped with their weapons even in inns. While it was not exactly for defense, not letting their guard down even in an open space was the correct thing to do for adventurers. However, walking down a safe road without any obstructions in total silence as if it were natural was very mentally grating. They were not compelled to hold a conversation. However, proceeding onwards while constantly being in such a state of caution somehow seemed wrong. And the ranger of the Axe of Cyclone who was walking in front, Lucrute, was also thinking the same thing. Lucrute turned around and talked to his companions. Hey, why are we walking in a straight line? I wonder why? It's strange. Because we might be attacked. Lucrute's eyebrow twitched. However, he maintained his composure. No, that's impossible. Saying that lightheartedly, Lucrute looked around. Spread out before him was grassland. Not even the shadow of a monster could be seen. I think this every time, but is it not strange that we walk through the town in formation? Because we might be attacked. No way in hell. By whom? If we were high ranked that might be true. But we are nothing. Caution should be taken at all times. As the druid Dine replied, his face had an expression of, no way, written all over it. There are times we should, and times we should not. Now is not the time to do it, right? No, a dragon might suddenly appear from afar and attack us. Nina, who replied to Lucrute, was a spellcaster and was not physically strong. It was clear how she did not want to use any unnecessary effort. What sort of shit story is that? That's normally impossible, Nina. Impossible. I have not heard of any dragons near E-Randall. Right? But what should we do while walking? The team leader, the fighter, Peter's words caused Lucrute to fall silent. As he was simply not happy with silently walking, he did not consider any possible answer to his words. We should. We should? We should? We should? While their timing was off, they all asked the same question. Talk about the surroundings would be nice. Like how it's sunny today? Walking underneath the warm sun makes me feel sleepy. Something like that. Are you all teasing me? That's not true, Lucrute. You were a good friend. Why past tense? Anyway, what did I do? Silence returned. Lucrute groaned as if pressurized by it. This guy. I personally do not think that it is a bad job. The reward is quite low. At that, Lucrute understood that his comrades were unhappy and he scrunched up his face. You accepted this job, right? Well, it's not a bad job, right? It's just going over to Carney Village for a look. As Lucrute's voice trailed off, his comrades sent cold gazes towards him. The reward is almost nothing. Why did you accept this job? There seems to be a beautiful busty woman amongst the priests of the water god. Silence fell once again, and the gazes on Lucrute extended past the realm of cold and had reached freezing. But while the reward is little, we can earn their gratitude, so it is not bad, right? True. Yes. But if we want to earn someone's gratitude, then a higher-ranking priest would be better. Well, it is not bad to hear about Carney Village's situation. As expected of our leader. Ignoring Lucrute's cries of joy, Nina and Dine nodded at Peter's words. The Knights of the Empire attacked the villages near Erandel. Anyone living near Erandel with a bit of situational awareness would know this information. However, as adventurers they would act to gain even more information. There was a rumor that the ones who attacked were not actually Knights of the Empire, and another that someone killed all the Knights who attacked. And those fake Knights of the Empire were said to have been killed in Carney Village. This information was credible enough to have the label of truth stuck onto it. It's our first job in a while, but it's nothing much. Right? Oh, don't forget. We also need to check on the recruitment that the village head is doing. Looking at Lucrute with cold gazes, Nina and Diane solemnly nodded. The request that the priest made of Lucrute this time round was to see if the recruitment of new villagers in Carney Village was taking place properly. When they were attacked by the fake Knights of the Empire, some of the villagers made it out alive. More than half of those fortunate souls escaped to Erandel. Villages are analogous to humans. It would be appropriate to say that a human had organs like a village was comprised of certain groups of villagers. Should important organs be lost, humans would die, and in the case of villages it would result in the dispersal of the village. If those villagers had relatives in the surrounding villages, they would go there. If not, they would rely on Erandel. The priests were the ones to help. Children without relatives or villagers who had their livelihoods stolen from them. Those that were originally supposed to be taken in by the government were instead helped by the priests. Of course, the priests could not prepare residences nor new jobs. They could only be taken in for a short period of time and help with the priests as the priests worked with the government to find new jobs for them. The reason Erandel did this was because it was a city with an excellent mayor. Depending on the noble governing the city, some would not provide any sort of aid. It was normal for villages that had lost a lot of people but still maintained the form of a village to recruit other villagers to repopulate it. This was natural. When the number of people decreased, several problems would pop up. Villages were a world of role allocation and mutual assistance. As the number of people decreased, the ability of the whole village decreased as a whole, causing a hole to open up in the system. Thus there was a need to rapidly increase their population. Marriage and having children took too long. It was true that the fastest method was the merger of villages. However, this would bring about many problems. The largest problem would be factional disputes. Villages were a world unto themselves. Should they merge, the chance that they would mix together peacefully was low. Normally, until they could trust each other, friction would occur. At worst, the merged village would have two powers governing it. In addition, villages that had lower numbers had the possibility of being absorbed. Thus recruitment. One would recruit families one by one. The jobs of the members of the Axe of Cyclone was to check that such recruitment did not infringe on the law. While it was a job that was important to the lives of villagers, the reward was low as it was a secret job of intel collection. However, it was at most looking at the village and talking to the village chief. To put it simply, they were messengers. It was natural for his other comrades to sulk when heard that he had accepted a job suited for the lowest rank F-class adventurers. However, adventurers were not that free to bear the dissatisfaction forever. As they voiced their dissatisfaction, most of it was dispersed after teasing Lucrute. After their mood had improved, they walked towards Carney Village in a line. Ha! Despite that, Nina made a tired sigh. Dine was walking directly behind him and asked in worry. Shall we rest? No, I am fine. The less cautious we are, the faster we are. Lucrute. How far is it to Carney Village? In terms of distance, just a bit more. We should be able to see it after we get over that hill. Lucrute pointed at a small hill that was 100 meters in front of them. Being able to see his goal made him pull out an unbelievable amount of energy. Nina put energy into her footsteps now that they had purpose. They climbed the hill. And then they stopped moving. What is that? Nina gasped in surprise. No, Even the other three showed expressions of surprise as they saw this scene. Is that a fortress? It was a wall firmly planted into the grasslands. This was an extremely unusual scene. It was true that they had often seen villages surrounded by walls. However, none had been as large or sturdy as this. It was a strong one made of stone. Oi oi, what now? The recruit saw this extremely unusual situation and asked the others. They said it was a simple village. Carney village. It is well known for its herbs, but I heard nothing of them being able to make such a wall. What was this? Everyone's faces expressed these words. It was a completely impossible feat for normal villages to build such a wall. However, in front of their eyes was a sturdy wall. They looked at each other, praying that someone had a reasonable answer to the strange situation playing out before them. However, after tens of seconds passed, no one spoke. Thus Peter made his decision. We should hide and watch. When you have an idea, say something. Following Peter's orders, the members of the Axe of Cyclone returned to halfway up the hill to hide themselves. They were not that foolish to openly talk in a wide area like a grassland. They looked at each other and spoke their thoughts. 1. Carney village is protected by a strong wall. Point 2. Some military force came and built it. 3. I got nothing. Point 4. The villagers worked hard. And there is only a wall on the side facing us. Everyone stopped moving and focused on Peter. That's it. That has the highest probability. If the village is completely covered, then it will be difficult to recruit any new villagers. True. Its strength can be called into question. Then, what? They all fell into deep thought. Their surroundings were grassland. There was nowhere to hide. It was easy for them to be found, but also easy for them to search around. Thus there was the possibility that they could check if the wall was sturdy if they looked around it. Seeing everyone's hope-filled gazes, Nina spoke. I have no confidence in my knowledge in architecture, you know? If only we could fly over invisibly. We could buy a scroll? It costs quite a lot. Quite out of our budget. We can't ask for something we don't have. Recruit. How about sneakily scouting the surroundings? Mostly impossible. Most of us can't tell if the wall is weak or not, you know? With all of us? Maybe not. If 2 was the right answer, then this place is dangerous. All of them fell into thought and looked at their leader Peter. Their eyes showed hope that he could lead them to a conclusion. Peter thought seriously for about 1 minute and came up with an idea. We should check if there are any villagers. All of them excluding Peter all raised cries of agreement. While this was passive, this was the safest option they had. So we check around? Recruit, take a look around. It's not clear what type of situation this is. Got it. The 4 members of the Axe of Cyclone moved around the surroundings of Carney village to observe it. Since the village stood completely above the grasslands, there were few places to hide, and while they could not completely hide themselves, they moved in a manner so as to not attract attention. This was extremely nerve-wracking, but it could not be helped. This was an action born from the possibility that a hostile armed group was inside the village. They went to the other side and confirmed the existence of several large fields. They saw the figures of several working villagers. The Axe of Cyclone all sighed in relief. Anyhow, they had confirmed the presence of the villagers. They observed the village meticulously to confirm that the village was not controlled by parties like the Empire's soldiers. Through their examination of the area, they did not feel that the villagers were mistreated or tired. They saw them slowly doing field work while singing farm work songs. There is no problem. True. There seems to be nothing going on. However, this wall seems to be sturdy. It's not weak. Then, since it's close to the Great Forest, wasn't this here due to caution? That seems proper, Nina? This seems new, but at this distance I can only tell so much. What should we do, Peter? Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Let's go. Note, a Japanese/Chinese proverb was used here, which literally translates to if one does not enter the tiger's den, one cannot get the tiger cub. Got it. How cautious should we be? Peter thought about Din's words and made a wry smile. It would be awkward to be so on guard. Let's relax. True. That seems good. Hearing Nina's agreement, Recruit and Din nodded. They did have some worries, but it would be bad if the other party thought they were hostile. The members of the Axe of Cyclone did not come for a fight, and wanted to do their job properly. With Peter at the head, they made a formation and headed towards the village on a mostly unused road. The wheat fields on the sides of the road were lush green and shook as the wind blew by. They walked through in a line. If one looked from afar it would look as if they were walking through the sea. "HN?" Lucrut was the second in line, raised a strange sound and looked in the fields. The wheat was not ready to be harvested but was over 70 centimeters in length. Of course, it was impossible to see through the sea-like field. "What's wrong?" Nina was walking at the back and asked in a worried voice. "HN? No, might have been my imagination?" Lucrut tilted his head slightly and rushed forward to close the gap with Peter. Nina looked in the direction Lucrut looked in, checked that nothing moved, and rushed forward as well. Peter was silent, but he made a friendly smile and moved closer to the village. As he did so, he made eye contact with a girl who looked curiously at him. She was standing alone in a field that was the closest to Peter, the field furthest from the village. The girl was cute but was just outside the region of being extremely beautiful. She looked bright, and by the standards of a village, she was quite the looker. The dirty apron clad on her figure made it clear that she was in the midst of farm work. "Hello." Peter gently raised his hands and raised a warm voice. As he did so his grip left his weapons. This was to appeal that they had no hostility to them. In response, the girl curiously turned her head and cupped a hand around her ear. Peter frowned slightly and again, in a louder voice than earlier, shouted, "Hello." The girl did not reply. Her face without makeup was strained as she kept her hand cupped around her ear. "She probably is unable to hear us. Could it be that she is deaf? It seems that she is doing field work in the furthest and least convenient place. It might be that. Life in a village is tough. Tyranny over the weak. I don't want to go through that." Several of his friends spoke in lowered voices from behind him. "Then would it be best to pass through?" "Maybe." As they spoke, the girl gestured to Peter to come closer. The speed at which she beckoned him was like a dog wagging its tail. "What should we do?" "It would be bad to refuse." "Hey, look." Pointed out by Dine, Peter cautiously looked at the surroundings and saw that the villagers had stopped working and were gazing at Peter's group. It was not rare for ostracism to occur in the frontiers, and Peter heard of such cases before. That could be what is happening, they decided. "I do not think that we should take any hostile actions towards them." "Agreed. Our side should be stronger, but why must we care so much about this stuff? It can't be helped. This is a chance to spread the name of the Axe of Cyclone. If we consider the consequences, we should be friendly to them." "True. It can't be helped. I'll go to the field." Leaving the three, Peter stepped foot in the field. As he cut through the wheat field and moved closer to the girl, his foot felt a strange weight on it. Then a low voice spoke to him. Stop there, Enri-san." In a panic, Peter looked in the direction of the voice and saw a small creature completely wrapped in wheat as camouflage in the wheat field. Since it was hidden by wheat, he could not see its face, but it was not human. The blade that creature held was pierced through the joint in his leg armor. This caused his leg to freeze up. "Wah!" Surprised, Peter raised a warning cry. Or at least he tried to. "Sorry about this, but could you please remove your weapons?" A small voice came from a different location. As he looked there was another one at the foot of the worried girl. No, not just there. Peter also felt a presence from behind him. Using a girl as bait. You're wrong. Enri-san became bait for us. Peter did not understand what was said and wanted to clarify when the creature spoke to him. "Hey, remove your weapons. Could you tell this to the others behind you? I don't want to fill them with arrows. It's not clear who you guys are." Peter hesitated, and felt that he could negotiate with this creature. It was painful to surrender without resisting to a demi-human, but doing so without understanding the situation would be a foolish action. "Will you spare us?" "Of course. If you surrender." While he did hesitate, Peter knew that he did not have time and made an immediate decision. Should they engage like this, Peter's Axe of Cyclone would be in an extremely disadvantageous situation. Thus he needed to tell this to the other members. "Everyone. Sorry. Surrender and take off your weapons." After Peter said that, he raised his hands above his head. Seeing that, the members of the Axe of Cyclone were confused. They did not understand what happened for them to suddenly receive such instructions. However, while their comrade told them to remove their weapons, there was no way they would immediately agree. They probably felt confused. With a shuffling sound, two demi-humans stood up from the field. "Goblins!" Nina whispered. The demi-humans stood up. They were goblins that they had often seen. They carried drawn bows and were gazing at them with sharp eyes. Should they fight? Nina, Lucrute and Dine looked at each other. Goblins as a race were shorter, lighter and less bulky than humans. While they did have night vision and attacking at night was dangerous, under the sunlight they were not opponents that the axe of Cyclone could not handle. With such opponents, they had the confidence to help even if Peter was taken hostage. However, there was a reason why they could not immediately decide. These goblins felt different from the one the axe of Cyclone always faced. If they had to put into words, the goblins before them felt trained. It was not rare for goblins to use ambushes by hiding in the surroundings. However, the figure of the goblins readying their bows were extremely orderly. They were completely different from the time when they adventured with the now famous Momin. If those were children with sticks, these were warriors used to their bows. Like how humans could train to get stronger, so could monsters. Even for demi-humans like goblins, this was natural. The goblins in front of them were far stronger than goblins the members of the Axe of Cyclone had faced before. Their hesitation had brought them luck. Hearing a sound different from the wind rushing past the field, Lucrute frantically looked behind him. Hee, so we were found. A goblin showed its face from the field and stuck out its tongue. He was trying to close in on them from behind, but he was not stealthy enough to fool the ranger Lucrute. If they looked around they would see some other things hiding in the wheat field. We're surrounded. We'll surrender. It is dangerous to do anything without knowing their numbers. How about forcing our way through? Because they could trust each other, the three them together could not make a decision. This was as they would immediately follow their leader's orders. However, what finally ended their hesitation was the opening of the gates and seeing what lay behind. That is. What? Ogres. Hey, what is that? What they saw were the figures of ogres that they knew well. However, they were wearing metal armor. In their hands were giant greatswords. The shine on their blades showed that they were well sharpened. There were 5 ogres wearing first-rate items. After the gate opened, they ran towards the 3 of them. Each of their steps was wide, and their fast speed felt abnormal. Including the goblins, their chance of victory was low. Perhaps even non-existent. Panic created unrest, unrest becomes confusion. However, they could not always be confused. The 3 of them completely understood this and raised their hands above their heads. We'll surrender. We are really sorry. Sorry. Those were the first words of the girl called Enri. What followed were the words of apology by the goblins. Seeing their uniformly bowed heads made one feel a sense of discipline from them. Since demi-humans like goblins and ogres often faced humans, they were often hunted by adventurers. Since they had often killed without hesitation, taking this attitude from these demi-humans now made them feel unpleasant. It was a truth that Peter could not avoid. Peter looked at the goblins in front of him. A goblin that looked like a spellcaster and a buff goblin that held a magic greatsword. And the rest that were equipped with high-quality equipment. The image of goblins they had up to now crumbled in their minds. Perhaps they should call the goblins the ones that pierced through their ignorance and made them widen their view of the world. While Peter did not speak, all of them were thinking the same thing. If they fought they would die. How could such strong goblins exist? It's fine, so please raise your heads. How could I treated the ones who came to check on the village like this. Well, it can't be helped. Yes, lots of things happened, and it's natural to be cautious. Peter laughed. However, his face had some darkness in them. This was as they had lost. And they did so without being able to lift a finger in resistance. Adventurers risk their lives to chase their dreams. Basically, their journey was always dangerous. Thus defeat always led to death. They had surrendered in this meeting with the goblins as they had felt that they could survive, but if they fought they would have won only in their dreams. Yes. Peter felt his confidence and his strength shake. To adventurers, the number one reason to retreat was the fear of death. While he had heard of this, he still did not understand their rationale, but at this instant, he felt it. However, he did not lose all his will that he would give up on this job. Peter forced a smile and asked Henry. Anyway, what should we do? They were in the wheat field from earlier. After the questions and distrust had ended, there was no reason to stay here. Yes. So I shall inform the village chief. Yes, please do. Seeing the retreating figure of Enri, Peter changed his tone and asked the boss-like goblin with a magic sword. Are you all usually this cautious? Knowing that he was referring to the goblins hiding in the field, the goblin made a thin smile. How could we? We saw you all checking around suspiciously, so we had the villagers assemble and wait. Should you choose to do anything, you would approach them, right? Thus we made a trap. So you turned the villagers into bait. It was true that if came to get hostages, they had to get close to the villagers. If they were not the type to do so, they would not move in the surroundings like that. At Peter's words, the goblins made uncomfortable faces. Thus you turned that girl into bait. You're good. Inviting us closer using the excuse of her hearing. And the field. You knew that we would not send everyone. Lucrute spat out those words. Hearing this, the goblin leader bared his teeth and made a dissatisfied face. Hey, it seems you are misunderstanding something. We would never let Enri-san meet danger. Nason. As those words made the members of the Axe of Cyclone feel some dissonance, the goblin leader continued. Please don't misunderstand. Even if Nason wanted to become bait, we only did it out of necessity. True, if it is that girl then we would lower our guard. Oi, you don't believe it? It's natural if you think about it. Who could use their master as bait? Huh? What did you say? Just now. Master? Why are you so surprised? That person, Enri-sama, is the master of us goblins and ogres. An extremely small cry of surprise came from the members of the Axe of Cyclone. Impossible. That simple village girl? Her footsteps and body looked completely like a regular person. That girl who could not defeat the Axe of Cyclone commanded the goblin troop. It was natural to think that it was impossible. There was no way they could accept this. Understood. She is the one in charge of negotiations due to her face, right? At Nina's words, the goblin leader made a broad grin. No way, right. If Nason seriously wished for us to die, we would. We all believe that, you know? They felt no lies in the goblin leader's words. They were different from his earlier words, with a certain gravity to them. The members of the Axe of Cyclone were at a loss for words. The goblin leader continued further. Nason even strengthened our weapons. Look at the ogre's armor and weapons. And our weapons. There is no way one can get it with their face right. The armor the goblins and ogres wore were all better than what the members of the Axe of Cyclone had. Then the girl Enri who was able to collect such items must have something to her. The goblin leader gave them a further push. This magic greatsword was given to Enri-san by a person who saw her as important. Impossible. It does not have a lot of magic. But a present. This was strange. The Axe of Cyclone all thought this, but did not say it. Magic swords were expensive. For the cheapest ones, low-ranked adventurers like them could try to pawn all their items and use all their rewards but still be unable to purchase one. Basically she had the worth that made it simple to give her such items or had connections. Who was that girl called Enri? As such thoughts filled their heads. I have made you all wait. Hi. You. Ooh. Ooh. Is something wrong? Seeing Peter and the rest who looked like their hearts flew out of their mouths, Enri asked. All of them looked at her breathlessly. Did something happen? No, nothing of the sort. Yes. So let's go. Yes. There is no reason to speak more than this. That is the case. The tone of the four of them changed. The one who changed the most would be Lucrute. The four of them gazed strangely at Enri and decided that it was impossible for them to find out who she was and recalled there was a job they had to do. The four of them were guided to the village. The guard in the station looked out of the window in a daze. Today at this time the number of people leaving and entering were low. Thus he had plenty of free time. As he made small talk with the other guards, one of them recalled something and spoke. Yes, this is the recent hot topic. Did you hear? There seems to be a mercenary group staying in Carney Village. Carney Village? The guard heard this name and immediately recalled. There was no way he could forget the name of the girl who left such a deep impression. Seeing him make a small sigh, the other guard interpreted it as him lacking interest and continued talking. Some adventurers went to Carney Village and said that there was a mercenary group made of demi-humans run by a young girl. Demi-humans? Ah, it seems that she commands the ogre and goblin mercenaries. Ogres and goblins? The guard was shocked and looked at his comrade. You're surprised too? Turning such things with low intelligence into subordinates. At his friend who did not take it seriously, another guard who was listening by the side spoke. How naive. About what? Goblins and ogres certainly are stupid. The basis of their decisions are if something is strong or weak. But they themselves are strong, you know? True? Ogres were existences that towered over humans. Their basic abilities were far different from humans. If one did not train extensively in the sword, a one-on-one victory would be ridiculous. Oi oi. Hearing his comrade's simple answer, the guard made a wry smile and explained further. If we ourselves were that strong, we would become amazing guards. Even one ogre requires several of us to defeat. The guard who spoke first made a look of surprise. I see. Then that's true. Ogres are stronger than regular humans. But for goblins it's naive. Another guard shook his head. The strengths are goblins have a large range. Some have the ability to use magic. And did you hear about the legend of the Goblin King? Ah. As the guard recalled a ridiculous but popular story, he raised a voice of understanding. In the story, the Goblin King fought a dragon and easily earned victory everywhere it went. It challenged more powerful existences riding on the dragon, and made a child with a human princess. As it was a story, his weapon was also fitting for one. It was a branch cut off from a giant Japanese ash. But isn't it a story? No, well yes. I heard this a long time ago. There are strong goblins. But they are nothing compared to the king. If you look down upon them you will regret it. Aren't there also existences like hobgoblins? I see. True. Not judging based on one's appearance is part of our job. The guard nodded and frowned. Then if that woman is not an idiot, and being able to rule over goblins and ogres of unknown power, she should be quite powerful. Yes. Even thinking of it simply, she can control several ogres. It would be best to think that she is strong. From what was originally a foolish woman, she became someone who had the strength to command ogres and goblins, causing one of the guards to cry out in alarm. What is that woman? How strong is she? Since she can control ogres and goblins, in terms of adventurers, she should be a? Could a bee do it? I'm not clear. Turning away from what his comrades were talking about, the guard retreated into his mind. What he recalled was the girl he met back then. Enri. She was probably the woman who commanded the ogres and goblins. No, there were others who could, but it was not wrong to think that the possibility was extremely low. She had enough raw strength to command. Especially when controlling those with low intelligence, power was necessary. There was also the proof that Enri had the raw power needed to command ogres and goblins. Bloodstained Enri. Of course, this was nothing more than his imagination. He simply recalled his delusion when he imagined her living a life drenched in blood. Yes, this was nothing more than a sliver of his imagination. Until now. If there was not anyone to hear his words. If there were not those who felt that his words held actual meaning and truth. Then the following would not have happened. There was a mercenary group in Carney Village. Their boss was called Bloodstained Enri. She employed ogres and goblins. Erantal was a city that is a fortress at the front line. Thus their topic of conversations were completely different from what other cities would have. Especially when the authorities did not censor information of strong people or mercenary groups, it was easy for such information to flow around. The topic of the mysterious mercenary leader appearing in Carney Village burned through like wildfire. When this information reached certain ears. Did you know? There seems to be a mercenary leader in Carney Village called Bloodstained Enri. Making a loud forceful whistle with a pray, the mayor of Erantal Panasale Gruz von Redermeyer asked the guildmaster Pluton who was sitting in front of him. I did. Bloodstained Enri. She was the commander of a goblin and ogre mercenary troop and was currently staying in Carney Village. It was written that she was born in Carney Village, but there was no confirmation that they were the same person. No, there was the record of a person called Enri, but nothing about someone like Bloodstained Enri. So? Did we find her backstory? No. Pluton shook his head. Ordered by Panasale, he had ordered an investigation but nothing came up. Is that possible? If she commands mercenaries, she should be known by other mercenaries, right? Panasale made a high-pitched whistle with his nose. Yes. What Pluton ordered was the search of records of the person called Bloodstained Enri. If there was a mercenary group that was comprised not of humans but of demi-humans like ogres and goblins with a human commanding was an extremely eye-catching thing. Thus they had believed that gaining such information was easy, but the reality was the opposite. It was as if Bloodstained Enri and the mercenary troop she commanded had appeared from thin air. Since it was such an eye-catching group, it was almost impossible for there to be no records of it. I do not know. If she had hid, There should be an extremely powerful backer supporting her. Does the Empire and Bloodstained have a relationship? No, rather than the Empire the Grand Council? The theocracy should have none, neither should Roble Kingdom. If it was a demi-human nation like the Council, Panasale had heard about goblins and ogres in their ranks. Lastly would be the possibility that they just formed. At this time, for unknown reasons, monsters are leaving the Great Forest. There has to be a relationship between this and her subordinate goblins and ogres. Panasale silently listened to Pluton's explanation and asked one question solemnly. Pluton. Is it rare for magic casters to rule demi-humans? I do not fully understand what you mean, so I have no confidence in my answer. But evil magic casters would have subordinates to protect them. Also goblins and ogres do have a tendency to obey the strong. Panasale made another whistle with his nose and nodded in understanding. Then this will be fast. Recall when the Empire. No, the theocracy caused pandemonium in the villages. Reading between the lines of that short conversation, understanding dawned on Pluton. The great magic caster, Einzulgon. He was probably equal to the head magic caster of the Empire. The reason why such a powerful magic caster had went to save Carney village was unknown. Panasale and Pluton were not such naive humans to believe that the great magic caster Einz would act due to his generosity. Thus they had investigated why he had did so. However, Panasale was saying that there might be a connection here. Did the powerful magic caster give Bloodstained ogres and goblins as subordinates? The possibility is high. We know that he used night-like monsters. Gazef-sama's testimony. Pluton nodded. He thought this was the most likely. Basically, when the great magic caster saved Carney village, it was to save Bloodstained. No, did he want to avoid activating Bloodstained? If she acted, he would bring her to Randall for some reason. Then Einz passed Bloodstained, the subordinate ogres and goblins. There is no contradiction. But then is Bloodstained simply related to Einz, or does she have some special meaning to him? Basically, it comes down to what she is. I had enough of this with Camilla, but with Bloodstained, I get too many headaches. At Panasale's wrung-out voice, Pluton keenly agreed. Agreed. There is too little information. This is really dangerous. With another whistle from his nose, he made a tired sigh. Shall we use adventurers to collect information? Panasale's eyes reflected Pluton as he shook his head. After some time passed, Panasale spoke. No, let's not. Anyway, the possibility that the monster magic caster Einzulgon is behind her is high. There is no need to bait a dragon. Then should we leave her alone? But then. Panasale hugged his head. It was natural. She had a relationship with Einzulgon. They did not even know if that was his real name nor his goals. There was far too little information. As the person in charge of a place like Randall that could become a battlefield, it was not strange for him to have information of powerhouses. Since there was a relationship with a person called Einz, it was reasonable to think that she had some level of ability. However, Bloodstained, Enri. It's too sudden. Yes. Pluton nodded. If we search for information, we will deploy a lot of people, so we should stop, and it seems that the other cities have not heard of this name. Stopping the investigation is correct. However, why is her name only known in Randall? No matter how much I think of this, I don't understand. What is her goal? Is there a reason to spread the name of Bloodstain? I believe she is not hostile. But I cannot predict anything. Panasale sighed. Since this much information was lacking, they could not read the actions of any party. Shall we move Momen? That might be good. What appeared in their minds was an adventurer whose power was equally unknown as Bloodstained. No, well, compared to the completely unknown Bloodstained, they had some knowledge about it. That completely unbelievable power. Destroying a skeletal dragon with complete magical immunity with sword, and being able to use the third tier of magic, a magic swordsman. He was an adventurer that was more powerful than anyone in Randall. He also had artifact-level items and could fight with the amazingly powerful vampire, Camilla. Lowest estimates would put him at the level of the 13 heroes, and was the owner of extreme power. He was someone they were trying to gain the support of, but it was not going well. If one imagined that the powerful magic caster Einzulgon was behind him, this was much better than acting rudely to such a person. Especially by requesting Momen, they could check on the movements on the one behind him. However, how will we move him? How about normally making a request? True. Seeing Panasale's growing hesitation, Pluton nodded helplessly. He was a man with no interest in money or women. They were considering how to not make him angry. Should there be a relationship between Bloodstained and Momen Viines, this much was confirmed, it was unknown what an act of sniffing around would do. Momen, and Ines supporting him. It was ridiculous that someone with authority and power like the Mayor Panasale had to pay such close attention to just two humans, but they had that ability. Now there was Bloodstained added to the mix. Really, will they let me rest? Panasale whispered. If another person knew about the situation she was in, a certain girl in Carney Village would probably be screaming the same thing.